The bullet shattered the crystal chandelier 3 seconds before Evelyn Cross realized she'd married a ghost. Glass rained down on 500 of the world's most powerful defense contractors as her husband, the quiet janitor she'd chosen specifically because he was nobody, moved like smoke through the crowd. His hands were suddenly wrapped around the throat of a man in a waiter's uniform. And the way Daniel's eyes had gone flat and merciless told her everything she needed to know. She'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. The corporate merger was supposed to be the dangerous part. The marriage was supposed to be simple. If you want to see how this impossible partnership survives what comes next, stay until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story reaches across the world. Hit that like button, and let's dive in. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive suite like it was trying to break in. Evelyn Cross stood with her back to the storm, watching her father's lawyer shuffle papers with the kind of deliberate slowness that meant bad news was coming. She'd known Richard Pemberton for 23 years, and the man had never once looked uncomfortable in her presence. Until today. "Just say it, Richard." He cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat again. "The board invoked Clause 47B of your father's succession agreement, effective immediately." Evelyn's fingers tightened around the armrest of her father's chair, her chair now, supposedly. That clause was theoretical, a relic from the 1950s when the company was founded. Theoretical until 3 days ago. Richard slid a manila folder across the desk. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I fought them on this." She didn't open the folder. Didn't need to. She'd read every word of her father's will, including the archaic provisions that the old guard had insisted on preserving. Heritage clauses, they called them. Insurance against the company falling into the wrong hands. "They want me married." Within 30 days. Richard's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. To maintain controlling interest, you need to demonstrate stability. Traditional family values. The board's words, not mine. "My father built Cross Defense from nothing. I have 2 master's degrees and 7 years of executive experience. But sure, what I really need is a husband." The bitterness in her voice could have stripped paint. "The shareholders are nervous. Your father's death, the timing, the circumstances. He had a heart attack. At 48, after receiving a clean bill of health 2 weeks prior." Richard held up a hand before she could interrupt. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what the board is thinking, what the shareholders are whispering. They want reassurance, continuity." Evelyn finally opened the folder. The terms were worse than she'd imagined. Marriage wasn't just required. It had to be to someone deemed appropriate by a board committee. Someone with no competing business interests, no criminal record, no history that could embarrass the company. Someone they could control. "This is Marcus Chen's doing." She said it as fact, not question. Richard's silence was confirmation enough. Marcus Chen, her father's oldest business partner and the company's COO, the man who'd expected to take over Cross Defense when her father died, and had instead watched Evelyn inherit 51% of the voting shares. "What happens if I refuse?" "The shares transfer to a trust controlled by the board. You'd retain a seat, but lose operational authority. Marcus would effectively run the company." "For how long?" "Indefinitely, or until you marry according to the terms." Evelyn stood and walked to the window. 30 floors below, New York crawled with evening traffic. Somewhere in that anthill of humanity was a man she was supposed to marry in the next 4 weeks. Someone appropriate, someone manageable, someone who wouldn't ask too many questions about why her father had really died. "I need options," she said. "Background-checked candidates, complete dossiers." Already prepared, Richard pulled out a second folder, this one much thicker. 12 potential candidates, all vetted for the board's requirements. Evelyn flipped through the profiles. Lawyers, junior executives, a distantly related European cousin she'd never met. Each one came with enough ambition to be a liability. The kind of men who'd see marriage to her as an opportunity, not an obligation. "These won't work. They're all qualified according to—" "They're all climbers." She tossed the folder back. "I need someone with no ambition, no connections, no interest in the company beyond the paycheck." Richard frowned. "That's not typically how one selects a spouse." "I'm not selecting a spouse. I'm selecting a solution. She checked her watch. I have a board meeting in 6 hours. If I walk in there without a plan, Marcus wins. So find me someone forgettable. Bond. The maintenance closet on the 14th floor smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Daniel Reed had been working at Cross Defense headquarters for 8 months, and in that time he'd learned 3 important things. The ventilation system had a blind spot near the executive elevator, the security cameras cycled on a 40-second loop, and nobody ever noticed the janitor. That last part was the most important. He was replacing the trash bag in conference room 14C when he heard voices approaching. Quick footsteps, sharp and purposeful. He recognized the cadence before he recognized the voice. Don't care what the optics are, Marcus. She's stalling. Give her time, Gerard. The 30-day window is standard. She'll comply. Daniel kept his back turned, moving slowly as he tied off the trash bag. In his peripheral vision, he watched Marcus Chen and Gerard Blackwood, the company's head of military contracts, walk past without a glance in his direction. And if she doesn't? Gerard's voice dropped lower. If she finds someone outside our approved list? She won't. Richard only gave her the files we prepared. Besides, Marcus stopped just outside the conference room. Daniel could feel the man's attention shift, though not toward him. Never toward him. Who else would she trust? Her father kept her isolated from the board for years. She has no allies here. Except you. I'm her ally as long as she's useful. Marcus's laugh was sharp. If Evelyn wants to play CEO, she needs to learn the first rule. The company always comes first. Their footsteps faded down the corridor. Daniel waited 30 seconds, then hefted the trash bag and walked toward the service elevator. His movements were practiced, unremarkable, just another invisible piece of the building's infrastructure. The service elevator descended to the basement level. No cameras here. The security firm had deemed it unnecessary. After all, who worried about janitors? In the storage room behind the boiler, Daniel pulled out his phone. Not the cheap flip phone the company had seen him use. The other one. Encrypted. Untraceable. One new message. Status? He typed quickly. Chen pushing timeline. Subject under pressure. No indication of awareness. The response came back in seconds. Maintain cover. Report any deviation. Daniel deleted both messages and powered down the phone. Then he returned to his card and his mop and his carefully constructed invisibility. Nobody noticed the janitor. That was exactly the point. Evelyn was on her 4th cup of coffee when Richard returned to her office at 11 p.m. He looked exhausted, which meant he'd actually been doing what she'd asked instead of just pretending to look. Tell me you found someone. Richard set down a single file folder. Thin. This was difficult. How difficult? Define your parameters again for me. Evelyn stood and started pacing. Someone with no criminal record, no competing interests, no social connections that could embarrass the company. Someone who won't try to leverage the marriage into power. Someone the board will accept but won't actually like. You're describing a ghost. I'm describing someone forgettable. She stopped at the window. Someone who'll take the money, sign the papers, and stay out of my way while I figure out what really happened to my father. Richard's silence made her turn around. You think I'm paranoid? I think you're grieving, and I think Marcus Chen is a bastard who's taking advantage of that grief. But Evelyn, your father had a heart condition. The autopsy was clean. I know. She did know. She'd read the report 17 times, looking for something the medical examiner had missed. Just humor me. Give me someone I can control. Richard opened the folder. Daniel Reed, 31 years old, current employee in building maintenance. 8 months with the company. Clean background check. No family. No significant relationships. Education limited to high school and some trade certifications. Previous employment history shows consistent work in janitorial and maintenance positions across several cities. Why several cities? He moves frequently. Never stays anywhere longer than a year or two. No debts. No assets. No apparent ambitions beyond his next paycheck. Evelyn took the folder and studied the photo. Daniel Reed had the kind of face that could disappear in a crowd. Average height, average build, brown hair that needed a cut, eyes that looked past the camera rather than at it. Nothing distinctive except she couldn't put her finger on it, something in the set of his jaw, maybe. or the way he held himself, even in a posed ID photo. He's a janitor in our building. You asked for someone with no leverage, someone you could manage. There's your candidate. Well, the board will fight me on this. The clause says appropriate candidate with no criminal record or competing interests. It doesn't specify income level or social status. If they reject him, they're admitting the real criteria is class, not stability. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen, and they know it. Evelyn studied the photo again. Daniel Reed looked tired. Not exhausted, just worn. Like someone who'd stopped expecting much from life and had made peace with that. Perfect. Set up a meeting tomorrow morning before the board can interfere. Evelyn, are you certain about this? Marriage, even a pragmatic one, it's still a business transaction. I need someone who'll understand that. Richard gathered his papers. I'll arrange it for 8 a.m., conference room, 22A, private. After he left, Evelyn returned to the window. The storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and glittering. Somewhere down there, Daniel Reed was living his unremarkable life, completely unaware that tomorrow morning his entire existence would change. She felt a brief flicker of guilt, then crushed it. He'd be compensated, handsomely, and all he had to do was show up, sign papers, and stay out of her way while she saved her father's company. Simple. She looked at the photo one more time before closing the folder. Something about those eyes bothered her, like he was looking at something far away, something only he could see. Evelyn shook off the thought. She was overthinking. Daniel Reed was exactly what he appeared to be. Nobody important. She needed to keep it that way. But Daniel was cleaning the executive washroom on the 22nd floor when his supervisor called. Reed, main office, now. He kept his voice flat, disinterested. I'm scheduled for floors 20 through 25 tonight. Not anymore. Someone from HR wants to see you. The line went dead. Daniel set down his cleaning supplies and checked his reflection in the mirror. The same unremarkable face stared back at him. He'd been wearing this identity for 8 months, and it fit like an old coat, comfortable, forgettable. HR calls were dangerous. They meant attention, scrutiny, deviation from the pattern, but refusing was more dangerous. He took the employee elevator down to the 3rd floor. At 7:42 a.m., the HR department was mostly empty. A receptionist he didn't recognize pointed him toward a conference room without looking up from her phone. Conference room 22A was one of the smaller executive spaces. Privacy glass, soundproofing, the kind of room where important people had difficult conversations. Daniel knocked once and entered. Evelyn Cross sat at the head of the table with a lawyer he recognized, Richard Pemberton, the old man who'd worked for her father. She looked exactly like her photos. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, dark hair pulled back in a way that was professional but not severe. Control in every line of her posture. She was also beautiful, which was a detail the employee ID photo hadn't captured, and clearly hadn't slept much, which was a detail she'd tried to hide with makeup. Mr. Reed, please sit. Daniel sat, kept his shoulders slightly hunched, his hands visible and still. Everything about his body language said, I'm not a threat. I'm not even interesting. Do you know who I am? Evelyn asked. You own the company. Technically, I'm the majority shareholder and CEO. Do you know what that means? You're my boss. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, there and gone. I have a proposal for you, an unusual one. But before we discuss details, I need to know, are you married, engaged, in any kind of committed relationship? Daniel let his brow furrow. Confusion, not concern. No. Any family, parents, siblings? No. What about friends, close social ties? I keep to myself. Richard was writing something in a legal pad. Evelyn studied Daniel with the kind of focus that most people found uncomfortable. He let the discomfort show on his face, shifting slightly in his chair. Mr. Reed, I'm going to be direct because we don't have much time. I need to get married within the next 30 days. It's a requirement for maintaining control of this company. The marriage doesn't need to be romantic or even particularly friendly. It needs to exist legally. Daniel let his eyes widen, let his mouth open slightly. The picture of a man hearing something absurd. What? I'm offering you a contract. You marry me, maintain the appearance of a stable domestic arrangement, and after 2 years, we divorce quietly. In exchange, you'll receive a salary of $200,000 per year during the marriage, plus a lump sum of $500,000 upon successful completion of the contract." He said nothing. Let the silence stretch. "You would continue working your current position, but you'd move into my residence. Separate quarters, separate lives. We'd appear together at necessary company functions. Beyond that, I won't interfere with your privacy." "Why me?" It was the first smart question he'd asked, and he saw something flicker in her eyes. Reassessment, maybe. Or suspicion. "Because you have nothing to gain from this beyond the money. No connections to leverage, no ambitions to advance. She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You're exactly what I need." "Forgettable," Daniel supplied. Another flicker in her eyes. "Uncomplicated." Richard slid a thick document across the table. "This is the prenuptial agreement. You should have a lawyer review it before signing." Daniel looked at the document but didn't touch it. "I can't afford a lawyer." "We'll provide one. Independent counsel, paid for by the company." "How long do I have to decide?" 12 hours. Evelyn's voice was firm. "If you agree, we'll file the marriage license application tomorrow and have a civil ceremony by the end of the week. If you decline, this conversation never happened, and you'll return to your normal duties with no consequences." Daniel reached for the document, flipped through it slowly, like someone who wasn't quite sure what he was reading but wanted to appear thoughtful. The contract was thorough. Richard Pemberton knew his work. Grounds for termination, behavioral expectations, financial arrangements, confidentiality clauses that would outlive the marriage itself. "What if I mess up?" he asked. "Say the wrong thing at some company event, embarrass you." "That's covered in Section 12. Minor social infractions result in coaching, not termination. You'd have to do something criminal or deliberately malicious to void the contract." He set the document down, looked at Evelyn directly for the first time. "Why is this company so important to you?" She didn't blink. "It was my father's legacy. I won't let it fall into the wrong hands." "But you'll let a janitor become your husband. If that janitor understands this is a business transaction and nothing more, then yes." Daniel stood. "I'll read this. Think about it. You have until 8 p.m. tonight. My direct number is on the last page." Evelyn stood as well, extending her hand. "I realize this is unconventional, Mr. Reed, but I'm offering you financial security in exchange for minimal disruption to your life. I think that's fair." He shook her hand. Her grip was firm, her skin cool. She held eye contact for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to seem confident, not long enough to seem challenging. She was good at this, at reading people, at managing situations, at getting what she needed. But she wasn't reading him correctly. Nobody ever did. "I'll call by 8, he said. Richard showed him out. In the elevator, Daniel examined the prenuptial agreement more carefully. It was a cage disguised as a contract. The financial terms were generous, but the behavioral clauses were restrictive. No media contact without approval, no independent business ventures, no access to company information beyond his existing security clearance. Evelyn Cross wasn't just hiring a husband. She was hiring a prop. Something human-shaped to fill a requirement while she did whatever she was really planning. The elevator reached the basement. Daniel walked past his supervisor without a word, retrieved his cleaning cart, and headed for the bathroom on the 9th floor that nobody used because the soap dispenser was broken. In the privacy of the stall, he pulled out his encrypted phone. Target made contact. Marriage proposal, cover intact. The response came faster than usual. Accept, maintain position. This is priority 1. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. Then he deleted it and powered down the phone. At 7:47 p.m., he called the number on the contract from a payphone near his apartment. Evelyn answered on the second ring. "Mr. Reed, I accept your offer." A pause. "You've had time to review the contract with counsel?" "I don't need a lawyer to understand what you're asking. You need someone to stand next to you and keep quiet." "I can do that." "This isn't a simple arrangement, Mr. Reed. Once we're married, you'll own me for 2 years. I understand, but you're also paying me more than I'd make in a decade of cleaning floors. That's worth keeping my mouth shut and wearing a suit occasionally." Another pause. Longer this time. Be at the courthouse at 10 a.m. tomorrow. City Hall, room 307. Bring identification. Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Reed? This needs to appear legitimate. We'll be scrutinized. If you have any habits, addictions, or skeletons that could surface, I don't. Everyone has something. Then I'm good at hiding it. He heard something that might have been a laugh, cut short. 10 a.m., Mr. Reed. Don't be late. The line went dead. Daniel returned to his apartment, a studio in a building that rented by the week, no questions asked. The space was nearly empty. A mattress on the floor, a single chair, a kitchenette that had never been used for actual cooking. On the desk was a laptop, encrypted and custom-built. He opened it and logged into a secure server that officially didn't exist. His handler's message was waiting. Brief? Daniel typed. Integration successful. Timeline accelerated. We'll have internal access within 72 hours. Objectives unchanged. Chen is primary target. Subject is secondary. Understood. Read. Maintain emotional distance. No attachments. Daniel stared at that last line. After 3 years of deep cover operations, after assignments that had taken him places and made him do things that still visited him in the small hours of the morning, a reminder about emotional distance seemed almost insulting. Affirmative. He closed the laptop and looked around the apartment. Tomorrow he'd move into Evelyn Cross's residence. Tomorrow he'd become someone else's husband, someone else's problem, someone else's forgettable mistake. But tonight, he was still Daniel Reed, still the janitor, still invisible. He opened the single drawer in his desk and pulled out the photo he kept folded in an envelope. A woman with dark hair and a bright smile, standing on a beach somewhere warm. The photo was creased from handling, the colors fading. Her name had been Sarah. She'd been real. She'd been 3 years ago. She was why he'd taken this assignment. Daniel put the photo away and lay down on the mattress. Tomorrow would be complicated. Tomorrow would require focus. Tomorrow, he'd marry a woman who thought she was using him, while he gathered evidence against the people who'd killed her father. And maybe, if he was very careful and very lucky, he'd find the truth before Evelyn Cross figured out she'd invited a weapon into her home. But tonight, he was just tired. The wedding took 6 minutes. Evelyn signed the papers with her father's Mont Blanc pen. Daniel signed with a ballpoint the clerk provided. Richard Pemberton and a paralegal from his office served as witnesses, both wearing the same carefully neutral expression. The judge was a woman in her 60s who'd clearly performed hundreds of these pragmatic unions. She read the vows with the enthusiasm of someone reciting a grocery list. Do you, Evelyn Marie Cross, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Do you, Daniel James Reed, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. They looked at each other. Evelyn's expression was carefully blank. Daniel's was the same unremarkable mask he always wore. We'll skip that part, Evelyn said. The judge shrugged and stamped the certificate. Outside the courthouse, rain had started again. Richard handed Evelyn the marriage certificate in a waterproof folder. I'll file this with the board by end of business today. Marcus will undoubtedly challenge the validity, but legally, you've met the requirement. Thank you, Richard. Mrs. Cross. Richard turned to Daniel. Mr. Reed, welcome to the family such as it is. He walked away, leaving them standing on the courthouse steps. Around them, the city moved in its usual chaos. Nobody looked twice at a couple who'd just gotten married. Nobody cared. My driver will take you to collect your things, Evelyn said. Whatever you need from your current residence, the rest we can provide. I don't have much. Even better. She started down the steps, then paused. Daniel, Mr. Reed, I want to be clear about something. This arrangement is purely professional. I won't intrude on your privacy, and I expect the same courtesy. We're married on paper. That's where it ends. Understood. Good. She pulled out her phone, already moving on to the next task. The driver will bring you to the residence at 6 p.m. We'll have dinner. Go over the expectations for your first public appearance. When's that? Tomorrow night. Company gala. 800 guests. Every major defense contractor in the hemisphere will be there. She looked up from her phone. Can you wear a tuxedo without looking uncomfortable? I can try. Trying isn't good enough. You need to look like you belong there. Like this marriage isn't the circus everyone will assume it is. Daniel descended the steps until he was level with her, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Mrs. Cross, you hired me to be forgettable, to stay in the background and not cause problems. I'm very good at being what people expect. And what do you think people will expect tomorrow night? That you married beneath you out of desperation? That I'm a gold digger or a fool? He kept his voice level, unremarkable. But if I stand next to you and keep quiet, eventually they'll stop looking at me and start looking at you. That's what you need, right? For them to see you as stable, in control. Evelyn studied him for a moment. You're more perceptive than I gave you credit for. I'm a janitor, ma'am. We're invisible until something needs cleaning up. Something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, or reevaluation. Then her phone buzzed and the moment passed. 6 p.m., Mr. Reed. Don't be late. She walked toward a black sedan waiting at the curb. Daniel watched her go, noting the way her driver opened the door without being signaled, the way she slid into the back seat without looking back. Evelyn Cross was used to people doing what she wanted, used to being in control. That was going to make this complicated. A different car pulled up, a gray sedan, company vehicle, unmarked. The driver lowered the window. Mr. Reed, I'm here to take you to collect your belongings. Daniel climbed in. The driver didn't make conversation, which was perfect. They drove through midday traffic to his apartment building, waited while he packed his life into 2 duffel bags, then headed north toward the address Evelyn had provided. The Cross residence was in Westchester, 40 minutes from the city. The house sat behind gates and walls, invisible from the road. Old money architecture, stone and ivy, privacy and permanence. The gates opened automatically. The driveway curved through landscaped grounds that probably required a full-time gardener. The house itself was smaller than Daniel had expected, but that was relative. Maybe 8,000 square feet, maybe more. A woman in her 50s met him at the door. Neat suit, professional smile. The air of someone who managed complicated households for difficult people. Mr. Reed, I'm Margaret Chen, the house manager. Mrs. Cross asked me to show you to your quarters. Chen, related to Marcus Chen's younger sister. Her smile didn't waver. I've worked for the Cross family for 12 years. Politics don't enter this house. Daniel followed her inside. The foyer was all hardwood and subtle lighting, expensive art on the walls, the kind that appreciated faster than most investments. Mrs. Cross's suite is on the 2nd floor, east wing, Margaret said as they climbed the stairs. Your quarters are west wing, separate entrance, separate living space. There's a shared study on the main floor that you're welcome to use. She opened a door to reveal what she'd called quarters. A bedroom with attached bathroom, walk-in closet, and a small sitting area with its own kitchenette. It's furnished, but if you need anything else, just let me know. Tuxedo is in the closet, tailored to your measurements. Mrs. Cross had it prepared this morning. Daniel set down his duffel bags. This is fine. Dinner is at 6 in the main dining room. Mrs. Cross prefers punctuality. Margaret paused at the door. Mr. Reed, if I may, this household runs on discretion and professionalism. Whatever arrangement you have with Mrs. Cross is your business. My job is to make sure everything runs smoothly. Understood. After she left, Daniel explored his new quarters. The closet held the tuxedo Margaret had mentioned, plus several suits, casual wear, even gym clothes. Everything in his size. Everything expensive, but not flashy. Evelyn Cross thought of everything. He unpacked his duffel bags in under 5 minutes. Most of what he'd brought was for show. Clothes he'd collected to maintain his janitor cover, a few books he'd never read, toiletries. The only things that mattered were the laptop, the encrypted phone, and the photo of Sarah. The laptop went into the desk drawer. The phone stayed in his pocket. The photo... He looked at it one more time before tucking it into his wallet. Sarah smiled up at him, frozen in that moment on the beach, before everything had gone wrong, before her father had been murdered for asking too many questions about Cross Defense's military contracts, before Daniel had volunteered for this assignment, trading 3 years of his life for a chance at the truth. At 5:50 p.m., he put on the tuxedo. It fit perfectly because of course it did. Evelyn Cross didn't make mistakes. Except one. She'd invited him into her home, given him access to her life, all because she thought he was nobody. Daniel checked his reflection in the mirror. The man looking back was unremarkable, forgettable, exactly what she needed. He went downstairs to meet his wife. 2. Evelyn was already seated when Daniel entered the dining room. She'd changed from her courthouse outfit into something simpler, dark slacks, white blouse. No jewelry except for the plain wedding band on her left hand. He wore a matching band. He'd barely noticed when the clerk had produced them at the ceremony. "Punctual," she said. "That's good?" "You mentioned you prefer it." "I do." She gestured to the chair across from her. Margaret prepared something light. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Dinner was salmon and vegetables, professionally plated. They ate in silence for several minutes. Not awkward silence, just the absence of necessary conversation. Finally, Evelyn set down her fork. "Tomorrow night, you'll need to know a few things. Key players, what to say, what to avoid. I've prepared a brief for you." She slid a tablet across the table. Daniel glanced at it. Photos and bios, color-coded by importance. Red for hostile, yellow for neutral, green for potential allies. Marcus Chen's photo had the darkest red border. "Chief Operating Officer," Daniel read. 23 years with the company, expected to succeed your father. "Until I inherited controlling shares." Evelyn's voice was carefully neutral. "Marcus will be watching us tomorrow, looking for weakness, for proof that this marriage is exactly what he suspects, a desperate attempt to maintain control." Which it is, she agreed, but he doesn't get to know that. Nobody does. As far as the world is concerned, we're a perfectly conventional married couple. Daniel scrolled through the other profiles. Gerard Blackwood, head of military contracts. Patricia Reeves, chief financial officer. James Whitmore, general counsel. All red or yellow borders. All potential threats. "You don't trust any of them." "I trust Richard Pemberton because my father trusted him. Everyone else?" She picked up her wine glass, didn't drink from it. "My father ran this company like a kingdom. Loyal subjects or enemies, nothing in between. When he died, the loyalists were suddenly exposed, vulnerable. And you think one of them killed him?" The wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. You're not fighting for the company. You're fighting for answers." Evelyn set the glass down very carefully. "We should discuss the script for tomorrow." "I don't need a script. Everyone needs a script at these things." "You need me to be forgettable, right? Unremarkable?" Daniel looked up from the tablet. "Give me the highlights. I'll fill in the rest." She studied him with that sharp, assessing look he was starting to recognize. "You're different than you were this morning." "This morning, I was a janitor being offered an insane contract. Tonight, I'm your husband preparing for a performance. The role changed. I'm adapting." "Are you always this adaptable? Are you always this suspicious of people doing what you want?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Touché." She walked him through the key players, the political landscape, the subtle hierarchies that would matter tomorrow night. Daniel listened and cataloged, his mind already building maps of relationships and leverage points. Most of what she told him, he already knew. He'd spent 8 months observing these people, learning their patterns. But he let her explain anyway, asking questions at the right moments, playing the role of someone learning for the first time. "One more thing," Evelyn said as Margaret cleared the dinner plates. "Marcus will test you, probably publicly. He'll want to see if you crack under pressure." "What kind of test?" "Questions about how we met, how long we've known each other, whether this is real or transactional." She met his eyes. "We need a story, something believable." "We met at the company. You noticed me working late one night. We started talking. Connection developed over time. Nothing dramatic." "That's too simple. People will assume I married the help out of desperation." "People are already assuming that. Making up a complicated romance won't change their minds. But simple and consistent?" Daniel leaned back in his chair. "That's harder to disprove. We keep it boring. We keep it forgettable." "You seem very comfortable with being underestimated." "I've had practice." Evelyn stood, gathering the tablet and her notes. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow starts early. My stylist will be here at noon to make sure you're presentable." "I thought I looked presentable." You look adequate. Tomorrow night you need to look like you belong next to me." She left before he could respond. Daniel sat alone in the dining room, finishing his water and thinking about Sarah. She'd looked like she belonged everywhere. Conference rooms, combat zones, embassy dinners. That rare kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly who you were and refusing to apologize for it. She'd been a contractor for Cross Defense, military liaison, connecting the company's weapon systems with the people who used them in the field. She'd seen something in the data streams, some pattern that didn't fit the official narrative. And then she'd died in a car accident that the police had ruled mechanical failure, 3 months before Evelyn's father had a heart attack at 48. 2 impossible coincidences, 14 months apart. Daniel climbed the stairs to his quarters. The house was silent except for the distant sound of rain starting again outside. In his room, he opened the laptop and logged into the secure server. First night complete. Access established. Subject intelligent but isolated. Chen will move soon. The response was immediate. Acquisition target. Internal communications. Financial records. Anything connecting Chen to external actors. Timeline? Before she figures out who you are. Daniel closed the laptop. That was the real deadline, wasn't it? Not the 2-year contract, not the divorce clause. The moment when Evelyn Cross looked at her forgettable husband and realized nothing about him was what it seemed. He pulled out the photo of Sarah one more time. "I'm close," he said to the empty room. "Whatever they did, whoever gave the order, I'm going to find them." The photo didn't answer. It never did. But tomorrow night, at a gala filled with 800 of the world's most dangerous people, Daniel would start asking the questions Sarah had died trying to answer. And unlike her, he knew exactly how deadly the answers could be. The stylist arrived at noon with an assistant and enough product to stock a salon. Daniel had been awake since 5, running through files on his encrypted laptop, memorizing faces and connections that Evelyn's briefing had only touched on. He'd also gone for a run through the estate grounds, mapping exits and sightlines out of habit more than necessity. Old training died hard. "Mr. Reed, I'm Antoine." The stylist circled him like a sculptor examining raw marble. "Mrs. Cross has very specific requirements for this evening." "She usually does." Antoine's lips twitched. "Indeed, please sit." The next hour was a production Daniel endured with practiced patience. Haircut, trim, subtle adjustments to his appearance that somehow made him look both more polished and less memorable. Antoine worked with the precision of someone who understood that his clients needed to project power without appearing to try. "You have good bone structure," Antoine said, tilting Daniel's chin. "Strong jaw, but you hold tension here." He pressed fingers against Daniel's temples. "And here." A touch to his shoulders. "Tonight you need to look relaxed, confident. I'm marrying up, everyone knows it. Shouldn't I look a little nervous?" "Nervous reads as weak. You want content, like a man who knows he's fortunate but isn't apologizing for it." Antoine stepped back, considering. "There, better. The tuxedo will do the rest." After he left, Daniel studied his reflection. Antoine was right. The changes were subtle but effective. He looked like someone who could stand next to Evelyn Cross without seeming completely out of place. Not her equal, but not her charity case either. The door opened without a knock. Evelyn entered, already dressed for the evening in a deep blue gown that probably cost more than his yearly janitor salary. She stopped when she saw him. "Well, Antoine works quickly. He says I clean up acceptable. He says that about everyone." She circled him the same way Antoine had, but her assessment felt clinical, checking boxes on a mental list. "The tuxedo fits well. Good. We leave at 6:30. The gala starts at 7, but we'll arrive at 7:15. Late enough to make an entrance, early enough to avoid seeming dramatic about it. Everything's tactical with you." "Everything's political," she corrected, "especially tonight. Marcus will have spent the last 24 hours working the phones, making sure everyone knows about our unconventional marriage. He'll want us to fail spectacularly." "Then we don't fail." Evelyn's expression shifted, something like approval flickering across her features. "You're taking this seriously." "You're paying me to. Besides," Daniel adjusted his bow tie, "I've never been to a gala before. Might as well try not to embarrass myself." Just stay close and follow my lead. If someone asks you a direct question, keep your answers brief. Modest. You're still adjusting to this world. I am adjusting to this world. Good. Use that. She checked her watch. I have calls to make before we leave. Margaret will bring you down at 6:20. She was halfway to the door when Daniel spoke again. Mrs. Cross. Evelyn. Why did you really choose me? She turned, one hand on the doorframe. I told you. You were uncomplicated. There are lots of uncomplicated people, ones with better social skills, better backgrounds. You could have hired an actor if you just needed someone presentable. Are you having second thoughts, Mr. Reed? I'm trying to understand the game, so I don't accidentally screw it up. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. You want honesty? Preferably. I chose you because you had no leverage. No family to pressure you, no friends to gossip, no ambitions to manipulate me with. You were invisible, controllable. She paused. Was I wrong? Daniel met her eyes. No, you weren't wrong. Then trust that I know what I'm doing. After she left, Daniel sat in the chair Antoine had used and thought about control. Evelyn believed she had it, believed she'd found the perfect pawn for her corporate chess game. And she was smart enough, careful enough, that most people would never see past the armor she wore. But Daniel had spent 3 years learning to read people who didn't want to be read. And what he saw in Evelyn Cross wasn't just calculation. It was fear, carefully hidden, but present in the tension she carried, the way she checked and rechecked details, the fact that she'd married a stranger rather than trust anyone in her father's inner circle. She wasn't fighting to keep the company. She was fighting to survive. His encrypted phone buzzed. A message from his handler. Chen departing office now. Personal security detail. Expect confrontation tonight. Daniel deleted the message and pocketed the phone. Marcus Chen was making his move. The question was whether he'd go subtle or aggressive. At 6:20, Margaret knocked on his door. Time, Mr. Reed. Downstairs, Evelyn waited in the foyer. She'd added jewelry now, understated but clearly expensive. Diamond earrings, a simple necklace. The wedding band on her left hand caught the light. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be. The car was a different vehicle than yesterday. A Mercedes, black, driver in formal wear. Daniel held the door for Evelyn before sliding in beside her. Not too close, but not distant enough to seem cold. She noticed. Good instinct. What? The door, the space between us. It reads as comfortable familiarity, not awkward formality. She pulled out her phone, already reviewing something. Keep that up tonight. They rode in silence through early evening traffic. Daniel watched the city pass, mentally reviewing the files he'd studied. Marcus Chen, 53, MIT engineering degree, 30 years in defense contracting. Married twice, divorced once, widowed once. No children. Known for a management style that valued results over methods. Also known for projects that pushed ethical boundaries. Autonomous weapons systems. Surveillance technologies that privacy advocates had tried to ban. Contracts with foreign governments that made human rights groups nervous. Sarah had been investigating his division when she died. You're tense, Evelyn said without looking up from her phone. Daniel forced his shoulders to relax. First time meeting 800 important people. They're not important, they're just rich and connected. There's a difference. She set down her phone. Most of them are cowards. They'll smile to your face and gossip behind your back, but they won't risk direct confrontation. The ones who will, Marcus, Gerard, maybe Patricia, those are the ones to watch. What about allies? You said your father had loyal people. Had. Past tense. Her voice went flat. Loyalty in this business lasts exactly as long as it's profitable. When my father died, his people scattered. Self-preservation. Except Richard. Richard's different. She trailed off, looking out the window. He was my father's friend before he was his lawyer. That matters to him. The car pulled up to the Grand Ballroom, a converted industrial space in Brooklyn that someone had transformed into an event venue. Elegant without being stuffy, modern without being cold. Outside, photographers waited behind velvet ropes, cameras ready. Evelyn took a breath. When she exhaled, her expression had shifted into something polished and unreadable. The armor was back in place. Smile, but not too much. Look interested but not overwhelmed. And whatever happens, don't leave my side unless I tell you to. Understood. The driver opened the door. Flashbulbs fired immediately as Evelyn stepped out, and Daniel followed half a second later. He offered his arm without thinking, and she took it with the ease of practiced choreography. "Mr. and Mrs. Cross," a photographer called out. "This way." They paused for exactly 3 photos, then continued toward the entrance. Daniel kept his expression neutral, interested, but not eager. Just a man accompanying his wife to a work event. Inside, the ballroom was already filling. Waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable. Everyone wore tuxedos or evening gowns. Everyone held drinks they barely sipped. Everyone smiled with their mouths, but not their eyes. Daniel hated it immediately. Evelyn. A woman in her 60s approached, champagne glass in hand. "Congratulations on your marriage. Such a surprise." "Patricia, good to see you." Evelyn's smile didn't reach her eyes either. "This is my husband, Daniel. Daniel, Patricia Reeves, our CFO." Daniel shook her hand. "Pleasure." Patricia's assessment was swift and dismissive. "I'm sure. Evelyn, we should discuss the quarterly projections before the presentation." "Later. Tonight's social, not business." "Everything's business, dear, you know that." Patricia's smile sharpened. "Though I suppose some business is more personal than others. Congratulations again." She glided away. Evelyn's grip on Daniel's arm tightened fractionally. "That's the easy version," she murmured. "Wait until Marcus arrives." They worked the room systematically. Evelyn introducing him to executives, board members, military contractors. Daniel played his role perfectly, polite but quiet, content to let her lead conversations, occasionally offering a modest comment when directly addressed. He was also cataloging everything: who stood near whom, who avoided whom, the subtle hierarchies and alliances that dictated the room's geography. Marcus Chen arrived at 7:40, fashionably late, and flanked by his security detail. He wore his tuxedo like armor, and his eyes found Evelyn across the crowded room with predatory precision. "Here we go," Evelyn breathed. Marcus approached with the confidence of someone who owned whatever space he occupied. Gerard Blackwood followed a step behind, along with a younger man Daniel didn't recognize. "Evelyn, you look lovely tonight." Marcus's smile was all teeth. "And this must be the famous Mr. Reed." "Mr. Chen." Daniel extended his hand. "I've heard a lot about you." "I'm sure you have." Marcus's handshake was aggressive, testing. Daniel matched it exactly, neither yielding nor escalating. "Congratulations on your wedding. Quite the whirlwind romance." "When you know," Evelyn said smoothly. "Indeed, though I have to admit I'm curious how you two met. The announcement was so sudden we didn't get any of the charming details." "We met at the company," Daniel said. "I was working late, she was working later. Started talking." "How romantic." A custodial worker and the CEO. Marcus's eyes never left Daniel's face. "What did you talk about?" "Work, mostly. The building. She mentioned some repairs that needed attention." "And that led to marriage?" "That led to coffee. Coffee led to more conversations. Conversations led to..." Daniel shrugged slightly. "Here." It was the story they'd agreed on. Simple, boring, impossible to disprove. But Marcus wasn't buying it. "Fascinating. And your family, Mr. Reed, what do they think of this match?" "I don't have family." "None at all? How convenient." "Marcus," Evelyn's voice carried a warning edge, "is there a point to this interrogation?" "Just making conversation with our newest family member. After all, cross-defense is a family business. We look out for each other." Marcus shifted his attention back to Evelyn. "Speaking of which, the board would like to schedule a meeting. There are some concerns about recent operational decisions." "My operational decisions have been sound." "I'm sure they have. But transparency is important, especially during transitions. Your father understood that." "My father's been dead for 6 weeks. I'm the CEO now." The temperature around them dropped 10 degrees. Gerard shifted uncomfortably. The younger man Marcus had brought looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Of course you are," Marcus said softly. "No one's questioning that, Evelyn. We just want to ensure continuity, stability. Your marriage certainly helps with that." His smile returned, sharp as broken glass. Assuming it's legitimate. Daniel felt Evelyn's posture change. She was about to respond, probably with something cutting and counterproductive. He touched her elbow gently. Mr. Chen, I get it. I'm nobody. Evelyn married me quickly, and that looks suspicious. If I were in your position, I'd be asking questions too. He kept his voice level, reasonable. But I'm not here to take anything from this company. I'm here because I love my wife, and she needed someone she could trust. If that bothers you, I'm sorry, but it's not going to change. The silence stretched for 3 seconds. Then Marcus laughed. Well, at least you're direct. He raised his champagne glass in a mock toast. Welcome to the family, Daniel. I hope you're ready for what that means. He walked away, Gerard and the young man trailing behind. The conversations around them slowly resumed, though Daniel could feel eyes watching, people pretending not to stare. That was stupid, Evelyn hissed. That was necessary. He was baiting you, trying to make you react emotionally. I gave him a different target. You made yourself the target. I'm already the target. At least now he thinks I'm sincere. Daniel snagged 2 champagne glasses from a passing waiter, handing one to Evelyn. Drink? Smile. Look like we're having a nice time. She took the glass but didn't drink. You're suddenly very good at this. At what? Reading a room, managing confrontation. Her eyes narrowed. You're not what you seem, are you? Daniel's heart rate didn't change. His expression didn't shift. I'm a janitor who got lucky, that's all. Janitors don't face down men like Marcus Chen without flinching. Janitors who've worked enough corporate jobs learn to deal with assholes. Chen's just a better-dressed version of every middle manager I've ever met. Evelyn looked like she wanted to push further, but Richard Pemberton appeared at her elbow. Evelyn, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Potential investor, very interested in the new satellite defense contract. Of course, she glanced at Daniel. Will you be all right on your own for a few minutes? I'll survive. She left with Richard, though Daniel caught her looking back once. Suspicious, starting to see cracks in the story he'd built. That was a problem. He drifted toward the bar, ordering water instead of alcohol. Around him, conversations flowed. Most of it was noise, gossip, small talk, the verbal posturing of people with too much money and not enough meaning. But some of it was useful. Heard the SEC is looking into their export licenses. That contract in Yemen was always problematic. Marcus says the autonomous systems are ready for field testing, but I don't know. Daniel filed it all away, his brain automatically sorting relevant from irrelevant. He was so focused on listening that he didn't notice the young man approaching until he spoke. You're Daniel Reed. It wasn't a question. Daniel turned to find the same man who'd been trailing Marcus earlier. Mid-20s, expensive suit, nervous energy barely contained. I am. James Whitmore, Jr., my father's the general counsel. I remember. We were introduced earlier. Right. Yeah. James looked around like he was checking for surveillance. Listen, I probably shouldn't be talking to you, but can we step outside for a second? Every instinct Daniel had trained screamed trap, but curiosity won. Lead the way. They went out to a balcony overlooking the Brooklyn waterfront. The temperature had dropped, and their breath fogged in the cold air. James pulled out a cigarette, offered one to Daniel. Don't smoke. Smart. James lit up, hands shaking slightly. I'm going to be direct because we don't have much time. You seem like a decent guy, and Evelyn's not bad for a billionaire. So I'm going to give you advice you didn't ask for. I'm listening. Get out. Divorce her, take whatever settlement she's offering, and disappear. Because staying in that family is going to get you killed. Daniel kept his expression neutral. That's dramatic. Yeah, well, dramatic doesn't mean wrong. James took a long drag. My father's worked for Cross Defense for 30 years. I've seen things, heard things. That company isn't what it pretends to be. What is it? I don't know specifics, but I know Evelyn's father didn't die of a heart attack. I know Marcus Chen has meetings with people who don't officially exist. I know there are contracts that aren't in any official ledger. He flicked ash over the railing. And I know people who ask too many questions end up in accidents. You're telling me this because you seem like someone who stumbled into this mess accidentally. And because Evelyn's going to need allies she can actually trust, and I'm too much of a coward to be one of them. James crushed out his cigarette. My father plays it safe. He does what he's told and doesn't make waves. Smart survival strategy. But it means he won't help her, even though he knows she's right. Right about what? About her father. About the company. About all of it. James turned to face Daniel directly. If you actually care about her, if this marriage is anything more than a transaction, then watch your back. Watch hers. Because Marcus isn't just fighting for control of a company. He's protecting something bigger. Before Daniel could respond, the balcony door opened. Gerard Blackwood stepped out, his expression hardening when he saw them. James, your father's looking for you. Right. Yeah, I was just... James nodded to Daniel. Nice talking to you, Mr. Reed. He left quickly, practically fleeing. Gerard lingered, studying Daniel with cold calculation. Mr. Reed, enjoying the party? It's educational. I'm sure it is. Word of advice, James Whitmore talks too much when he's nervous. I wouldn't put too much stock in whatever conspiracy theories he was sharing. He was bumming a cigarette. I don't smoke. Of course. Gerard smiled without warmth. Still, it's good to be careful about the company you keep, especially now that you're part of this family. Reputation matters. I'll remember that. Gerard walked back inside. Daniel waited a full minute before following, using the time to process what James had said. People who ask too many questions end up in accidents. Sarah had asked questions. Then she died. Evelyn's father had presumably asked questions. Then he died. And now Evelyn was asking questions, digging into her father's death, fighting Marcus for control of a company that might be covering up something bigger than corporate politics. Daniel pulled out his encrypted phone and sent a quick message. Potential asset. Whitmore Jr. frightened but informed. Advise. The response came back fast. No contact. Too unstable. Focus on primary objective. He deleted both messages and returned to the ballroom. The party had reached that stage where alcohol loosened tongues and professional courtesy started slipping. Conversations grew louder, laughter more forced. He found Evelyn near the far wall, trapped in conversation with Patricia Reeves and two other board members. She looked composed but exhausted, the kind of tired that came from constant vigilance. When she saw Daniel approaching, something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe. Excuse me, gentlemen, Patricia. My husband's back. She extracted herself smoothly, taking Daniel's arm. Thank you for the fascinating discussion about fiscal policy. They walked toward the center of the room, putting distance between themselves and the board members. You were gone for 20 minutes, Evelyn said quietly. James Whitmore cornered me, wanted to warn me about the dangers of being in your family. She tensed. What did he say? That your father didn't die of natural causes, that Marcus is protecting something, that I should run while I can. Daniel kept his voice casual. Pretty standard conspiracy theory stuff. Did you believe him? Should I? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Around them, the party continued its elegant charade. My father had a heart attack. The autopsy confirmed it. No signs of foul play, no toxicology issues. It was just bad luck. But you don't believe that. I didn't say, you don't have to. You married a stranger to keep control of this company. That's not the move someone makes if they think their father died naturally. She pulled him toward a quieter corner away from listening ears. Be very careful what you're suggesting, Daniel. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm observing. He met her eyes. You're terrified. You hide it well, but it's there. You don't trust anyone in this room except maybe Richard. And you're fighting to control this company not because you want power, but because you think someone here killed your father and you need the position to prove it. Evelyn's face went very still. You're overstepping. Probably. But you asked me to help you tonight, and I can't do that if I don't understand what we're actually fighting. For a long moment, she just looked at him, weighing options, calculating risks, deciding how much truth to share with the stranger she'd married. Later, she finally said. Not here, but yes, we need to talk. About a lot of things. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Daniel played his role, smiled when appropriate, stayed quiet when smart. He watched Marcus work the room with the ease of someone who believed victory was inevitable, watched Patricia Reeves triangulate alliances, watched Gerard Blackwood whisper in ears and collect information. and he watched Evelyn fight a battle on multiple fronts simultaneously, projecting confidence while exhausted, maintaining authority while under siege, pretending her marriage was real while everyone assumed it was fake. She was magnificent, and she was going to burn out if she kept this pace. At 11, Richard appeared at her elbow. "That's enough for tonight. You've made your appearance," reassured the nervous investors. "Time to go home." Evelyn looked like she wanted to argue, but Daniel touched her hand gently. "He's right. We've done what we came to do." They made their exit slowly, saying goodbyes to key players, ignoring the whispers that followed them. Marcus caught Evelyn's eye across the room and raised his glass in another mocking toast. She didn't respond. In the car, Evelyn collapsed against the seat and closed her eyes. "That was worse than I expected. You did fine." "I looked desperate, defensive. You looked like someone fighting for something that matters. There's a difference." Daniel waited until they were out of the parking lot before continuing. "Marcus thinks he's won. That's useful." "How is that useful?" "Confident enemies make mistakes." Evelyn opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked, like she was seeing him for the first time. "Who are you, Daniel Reed?" "Your husband, for the next 2 years anyway." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." They rode in silence the rest of the way home. When they arrived, Evelyn went straight upstairs without another word. Daniel waited until her door closed, then headed to his own quarters. He had work to do. At 1 in the morning, when he was certain the house was asleep, Daniel opened his laptop and began sorting through the information he'd gathered tonight. Names, connections, overheard conversations. Pieces of a puzzle he'd been assembling for 3 years. Sarah's face smiled at him from the photo on his desk. She'd been so close to the truth when she died. Had been investigating Marcus Chen's military contracts, tracking money through shell corporations, building a case that Cross-Defense was selling weapons to groups it shouldn't be. Then her brakes had failed on a mountain road. Mechanical failure, the report said. Just like Evelyn's father had died of a heart attack. Just like James Whitmore was too scared to ask questions. Daniel's encrypted phone buzzed. Report. He typed, "Chen aggressive but confident. Subject beginning to suspect cover." Whitmore Jr. approached with warnings. Suggest accelerating timeline. Negative. Maintain position. Trust is the objective. Trust takes time. You don't have time. Chen is moving. Finish this before he does. Daniel stared at that last message. His handler was right. Marcus was moving, consolidating power, preparing for whatever play would remove Evelyn from the board permanently. But rushing meant mistakes, and mistakes meant people died. He thought about Evelyn's face tonight, the way she'd looked when he'd called out her fear. She'd almost told him the truth then, almost trusted him, almost wasn't good enough. There was a soft knock on his door. Daniel closed the laptop and checked the time, 1:30 a.m. He opened the door to find Evelyn standing in the hallway, still in her gown, makeup smudged from tiredness. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "We need to talk. Like I said earlier." She glanced past him into his room. "May I?" He stepped aside. She entered, looking around at his Spartan quarters with an expression he couldn't read. "You haven't unpacked much." "Don't have much to unpack." She sat in the chair by the window, and Daniel caught a glimpse of something in her posture. Vulnerability, maybe. Or just exhaustion. "You were right tonight," she said quietly. "About my father. About why I'm really fighting for this company." Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, giving her space. "I'm listening." "My father died 6 weeks ago. Heart attack at his desk. No warning, no prior symptoms. The autopsy showed an enlarged heart, arterial blockage. Clean medical explanation." She looked at her hands. Except 3 weeks before he died, he passed his annual physical with perfect marks. Excellent cardiovascular health. The doctor literally said he had the heart of a 30-year-old. Hearts can fail suddenly. They can. But my father also called me the night before he died. 2 in the morning. He sounded scared, which was unusual because my father wasn't afraid of anything. Her voice cracked slightly. He said he'd found something in the company records, something that didn't make sense. He was going to bring it to the board the next day. What did he find? I don't know. He died before he could tell me. And when I went through his office, his files, his computer, everything was clean. Too clean, like someone had sanitized it. Daniel processed this carefully. You think Marcus killed him? I think someone did. Marcus had the most to gain from his death. He expected to control the company, thought the board would back him. When my father's will revealed I had controlling shares, she laughed bitterly. That's when they invoked the marriage clause. Probably Marcus's idea. Force me to scramble, make me look desperate and weak. But you weren't desperate enough to trust anyone in his organization. No. Because if someone in the company killed my father, they're still there, still watching, still waiting for me to make a mistake. She met his eyes. That's why I chose you, and not just because you were forgettable, because you were outside, unknown, someone I could control completely. Except you can't control me. No, she agreed. I'm starting to realize that. You're too observant, too competent, too... She trailed off. I don't know what you are, Daniel, but you're not just a janitor. This was the moment. The choice between maintaining his cover and building the trust he needed. Between following orders and following instinct. Sarah's photo sat on his desk, just visible in his peripheral vision. He made his decision. You're right. I'm not just a janitor, but I'm not your enemy either. Then who are you? Someone who had questions about cross-defense before you ever posted that job opening. Someone who's been watching this company for a long time. He leaned forward. And someone who thinks you're right about your father. Evelyn stood abruptly. I want the truth. Now. The truth is complicated. I don't care. You came into my life, into my home, under false pretenses. You owe me an explanation. Daniel stood as well, maintaining distance but holding her gaze. 3 years ago, someone I cared about died in a car accident. Brake failure, the police said. Mechanical malfunction. Just bad luck. What does that have to do with... She was a military contractor for cross-defense. She was investigating irregularities in Marcus Chen's division. Weapon sales that didn't match official records. Money moving through accounts that shouldn't exist. His voice stayed level. 2 weeks before she died, she told me she was close to proving something big. Something that went all the way to the top of the company. Evelyn's expression shifted from anger to shock. Your wife? Not my wife, but someone important. And when she died, the investigation died with her. Case closed, accident filed away, everyone moved on. He pulled out his encrypted phone, showed her the photo of Sarah. Everyone except me. She stared at the photo, then at him. You've been investigating cross-defense for 3 years? I've been looking for proof, for connections, for anything that would explain why a contractor with no enemies and a perfect driving record suddenly died on a road she'd driven hundreds of times. And you think, Marcus, I think your father found what Sarah was looking for. I think that's why he died. And I think if you keep pushing, you'll be next. Daniel put the phone away. So when I saw the job posting for maintenance staff, I applied. Spent 8 months building a cover, learning the company, mapping the players. And when you posted that marriage announcement, I saw an opportunity. To use me. To help you. Because we want the same thing, Evelyn. We want the truth about what cross-defense is really doing. And we want the people responsible to pay for it. She was quiet for a long time, processing. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold. Get out. Evelyn. Get out of my house, now. This marriage is over. You can't afford that. The board, I'll deal with the board. I won't deal with you. She moved toward the door. You have 1 hour to pack and leave. If you're still here after that, I'm calling security. She left before he could respond, the door closing with finality. Daniel sat back down on the bed and pulled out his encrypted phone. Typed a message. Cover blown. Subject knows. Advise. The response took longer than usual. When it came, it was just 2 words. Stay put. He looked at the photo of Sarah one more time, then at the closed door where Evelyn had been standing. He'd gambled on trust and lost. Now he had to figure out how to fix it before Marcus Chen made his next move, because whatever was coming, it was coming soon, and neither he nor Evelyn was ready for it. Daniel didn't pack. Instead, he sat in the chair by the window and waited, watching the estate grounds turn gray with pre-dawn light. His encrypted phone stayed silent. His handler's orders had been clear, stay put. But following orders had always been easier when he wasn't watching someone else make the mistakes he'd already made. Evelyn thought she could handle this alone. Thought anger and determination were enough to survive people who killed to protect their secrets. Sarah had thought the same thing. At 6 a.m., his door opened without a knock. Margaret stood in the hallway, her expression professionally neutral. "Mrs. Cross would like to see you in the study, immediately." Daniel followed her downstairs. The study was a room he hadn't been in before. Dark wood, leather furniture, shelves lined with books that looked read rather than decorative. Evelyn sat behind his desk, still wearing last night's gown, her makeup now completely gone. She looked exhausted and furious, and something else Daniel couldn't quite name. Margaret closed the door behind him, leaving them alone. "Sit," Evelyn said. He sat. She slid a folder across the desk. "I spent the last 4 hours going through my father's files. The ones I have access to anyway, cross-referencing dates, looking for patterns." She tapped the folder. "Open it." Inside were printouts, financial transfers, shipping manifests, contract amendments. Daniel recognized some of it immediately. The same documents Sarah had been tracking 3 years ago. "You found the weapons sales," he said quietly. "I found inconsistencies. Shipments that don't match purchase orders. Contracts with shell companies that don't seem to exist beyond a P.O. box in Delaware. Money moving through accounts that aren't in our official ledgers." She leaned back. "My father kept a separate set of books, hidden files on a private server. I only found them because I knew his password habits. Does Marcus know about these files? I don't think so. If he did, they'd be gone." She pulled out another document. "This is from 6 weeks ago, 3 days before my father died. A transfer authorization for $40 million to an account in the Cayman Islands. Flagged for review but never processed." Daniel studied the document. The authorization code was Marcus Chen's. "Your father found this and confronted him." "That's my theory. And Marcus, or someone working for him, made sure he couldn't follow through." Her hands were shaking slightly. She pressed them flat on the desk to still them. "So here's where we are. You lied to me about who you are. You infiltrated my company under false pretenses. You married me as part of an investigation you've been running for 3 years. Yes? I should throw you out, report you, end this disaster before it gets worse." "You should, but I'm not going to." She met his eyes. "Because you're right. I can't do this alone. And everyone I trusted is either dead, complicit, or too scared to help." "What are you asking, Evelyn?" "I'm asking if your investigation was legitimate, if you actually care about finding the truth, or if you're just using my father's death to settle a personal score." Daniel thought about Sarah's smile in that photograph, about the 3 years he'd spent building covers and chasing shadows, about the choice he'd made last night to tell Evelyn the truth. "Both," he said. "It's personal, but that doesn't make it less legitimate." She studied him for a long moment. "Who do you work for?" "People who want cross-defense investigated quietly. People who think your company's been selling weapons to groups it shouldn't be, and that those sales are connected to things happening in places most Americans don't pay attention to." "What people? CIA? FBI? Does it matter?" "It matters if I'm going to trust you." Daniel stood and walked to the window. Outside, the grounds were waking up, gardeners arriving, security patrol changing shifts, normal people doing normal work, completely unaware that the house they serviced was becoming a battlefield. "I can't tell you who I work for," he said carefully, "partly because operational security matters, partly because the less you know, the safer you are if this goes wrong." "If?" "When. When this goes wrong." He turned back to face her. "Marcus knows something's off. He's too smart not to notice that you're digging. And once he figures out what you found in your father's files, he'll move to shut you down permanently. Let him try. Evelyn, listen to me. These aren't corporate rivals. These are people who've killed before and will kill again. Your father, my friend, they're not isolated incidents. They're warnings about what happens when you threaten the wrong interests. So what? I just accept that my father was murdered and do nothing? No, we build a case, carefully, quietly. We gather evidence that's undeniable, then we bring it to people who can actually do something about it." Daniel moved closer to the desk. "But that takes time and patience. If you go after Marcus directly right now, you'll lose, or worse." I don't have time. The board's already circling. If I don't maintain control, then we make sure you maintain control while we work. That's what the marriage was for, right? Buying you time? Evelyn laughed bitterly. The marriage was supposed to be simple, a prop to satisfy a requirement. Now it's... She stopped. What is it now, Daniel? A partnership, if you want it to be. A partnership with someone who lied to me from the beginning. Yes, I'm not going to apologize for that. You needed someone you could control, and I needed access to this company. We both used each other. He sat back down. But I told you the truth last night when I didn't have to. That has to count for something. She was quiet, fingers drumming on the desk, making calculations, weighing risks, deciding whether to trust the stranger she'd married or burn everything down trying to go it alone. If we do this, if I agree to work with you, I need complete honesty. No more secrets. I can't promise that. There are things I'm not authorized to share. Then we don't have a partnership. We have you using me for your investigation while I stumble around in the dark. Daniel considered his options. His handler would be furious. Every protocol he'd learned screamed against full disclosure. But Evelyn was right. She couldn't help him if she didn't know what they were really fighting. The weapons sales your father found? They're not just going to shady buyers. They're being routed through Marcus's network to insurgent groups in 3 different countries. Groups that are technically our enemies, but groups that also serve certain strategic interests. What interests? The kind that justify increased defense budgets. The kind that make wars profitable. He pulled out his phone and showed her files Sarah had compiled. My friend tracked 40 million in weapons to a group in Yemen that attacked a U.S. embassy 2 years ago. The attack killed 6 people and triggered a massive counterterrorism contract that Cross Defense won. $100 million, 5-year term. Evelyn's face went pale. We armed the people who attacked us, then got paid to fight them. Not we. Marcus, using Cross Defense as cover, and probably splitting profits with people in government who benefit from perpetual conflict. That's insane. That's business. For a certain kind of person. She stood abruptly and walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. My father built this company to protect people. He believed in the work, believed we were making the world safer. Maybe he did, but somewhere along the way, Marcus turned it into something else. And when your father found out, he died. She turned back. And if we expose this, Marcus will kill me too. Probably. Unless we're smarter than he is. Are we? I am. You are. Together? Daniel stood as well. We have a chance, but only if we trust each other and move carefully. Evelyn returned to the desk and gathered the documents. What's the plan? First, we secure this evidence somewhere Marcus can't find it. Second, we figure out who else is involved, because he's not doing this alone. Third, we keep up appearances while we work. The marriage, the corporate duties, all of it. We can't let him know we're onto him. He already suspects something. Suspects isn't the same as knows. We gave him a story last night, the desperate CEO and her inappropriate husband. Let him believe it while we dig. She sat down heavily. I've never been good at pretending. You've been pretending to be fine since your father died. Pretending to be in control when you're barely holding it together. You're better at this than you think. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be true. A knock at the door interrupted them. Margaret's voice came through. Mrs. Cross, Mr. Pemberton is on the line. He says it's urgent. Evelyn picked up the desk phone. Richard, what's wrong? Daniel watched her expression shift from tired to alert to furious in the space of 10 seconds. When? Who authorized it? No, don't answer that. I'll be there in an hour. She hung up. Emergency board meeting, called this morning by Marcus. He's moving to have me removed as CEO, pending a competency review. Can he do that? With enough board votes, he can do anything. And he's had 6 weeks to line up support. She was already moving, gathering papers. I need to get to the office. Present a united front. I'm coming with you. This is a board meeting. Spouses aren't invited. Then I'll wait outside. But you're not walking into that room alone. She started to argue, then stopped. Fine. But stay out of sight. The last thing I need is Marcus using you as ammunition. They took separate cars. Evelyn in her Mercedes with her driver, Daniel following in one of the estate's other vehicles. The drive into the city was tense, traffic heavier than usual because of an accident on the bridge. Daniel used the time to check in with his handler. Subject aware of operation, marriage continuing, Chen moving against her today. The response came quickly. Status of evidence? Secured. Subject has additional files. More than we knew. Get copies. That's priority 1. Understood. He deleted the messages and focused on driving. Ahead, Evelyn's car navigated through traffic with the efficiency of someone who'd made this commute 1,000 times. She was probably on the phone already, calling Richard, trying to line up votes, fighting a battle she couldn't win through normal channels. Because the board wasn't interested in truth or justice. They were interested in stability and profit. And Marcus was very good at providing both. They arrived at Cross Defense Headquarters just after 8 a.m. The building was a steel and glass monument to military-industrial success. 30 stories of offices and labs, and secure facilities where engineers designed the future of warfare. Sarah had worked on the 14th floor. Daniel had mopped those floors for 8 months, watching her old colleagues work on projects she'd never see completed. Evelyn went straight to the executive elevators. Daniel took the stairs, climbing to the 29th floor, where the boardroom was located. He positioned himself in a hallway alcove with a clear view of the entrance, but out of direct sight. At 8:30, the board members started arriving. Marcus came first, flanked by his security detail and looking entirely too confident. Patricia Reeves followed, then Gerard Blackwood. James Whitmore Sr. arrived with his son trailing behind, the younger man looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Richard Pemberton was the last to arrive, and he paused when he saw Daniel in the alcove. "You shouldn't be here." "I'm waiting for my wife." "This is going to get ugly. Marcus has the votes." "How many?" "Enough. He's been making promises, calling in favors. Evelyn's too young, too inexperienced, too emotionally compromised by her father's death." Richard's expression was grim. The marriage didn't help, made her look desperate. She is desperate. She's fighting for her father's company against people who want to destroy it. That's not how the board sees it. They see a 28-year-old who inherited something she's not ready for and married a janitor to keep it. He started toward the boardroom. "Do her a favor, walk away. Let her salvage what she can without this disaster of a marriage hanging around her neck." He went inside before Daniel could respond. Through the frosted glass walls, Daniel could see figures taking their seats around the conference table. Evelyn sat at the head, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. Marcus sat at the opposite end, equally composed. The meeting started. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. Marcus speaking with calm authority. Evelyn responding with controlled intensity. Board members nodding, taking notes, asking questions. It went on for an hour, then 90 minutes. At the 2-hour mark, voices started rising. Daniel saw Evelyn stand, her hands pressed flat on the table. Marcus remained seated, saying something that made several board members shift uncomfortably. Then the vote. It was quick. Hands raised, counted, recorded. Daniel didn't need to hear the result. Evelyn's expression told him everything. She'd lost. The meeting ended. Board members filed out, avoiding eye contact with Daniel as they passed. Patricia Reeves paused long enough to say, "This is better for everyone. She'll understand eventually." Richard emerged looking like he'd aged 10 years. They voted 8-4 to place her on administrative leave pending a full review of company operations. Marcus is interim CEO effective immediately. How long is the review? Could be months, could be years. The board decides when it's complete. He pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. She fought well, but she was never going to win this. Not against Marcus. Evelyn came out last, her face a mask of control that was cracking at the edges. She saw Daniel and something flickered in her eyes. Anger, maybe, or relief that he'd stayed. "We're leaving," she said. They didn't speak until they were in her car, the driver navigating back toward Westchester. Evelyn stared out the window, her jaw tight. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "Don't. Just don't." She pulled out her phone and started typing. "Marcus thinks he's won. He thinks he can push me aside and run the company however he wants." "Can't he?" "He can run the company, but I still own 51% of the voting shares. He can't make major decisions without my approval. Can't sell assets, can't dissolve divisions, Can't fundamentally change the corporate structure. She finished typing and sent the message. So he gets to play CEO, but I still have leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind that makes him very nervous. Because if he's using cross-defense to run illegal weapons sales, he needs access to certain accounts and systems to cover his tracks. Accounts I can freeze, like systems I can audit. He'll find a way around that. Maybe, but it buys us time to find proof he can't deny. She looked at Daniel directly. You said you had evidence. Where is it? Secure location, not connected to you or the company. I want to see it, all of it, everything you've collected over 3 years. That's not negotiable. If we're partners, I need to know what we're working with. Her voice was steel. And if we're not partners, then this marriage ends right now and you lose your access to everything. Daniel considered his options. His handler would be furious, but Evelyn was right. She couldn't help if she was working blind. Tonight. I'll bring the files to the estate. But Evelyn, once you see this, you can't unknow it, and it's going to change how you see your father's company. My father's company is already gone. Marcus took it this morning. She turned back to the window. All that's left is finding out why my father died, and making sure the people responsible pay for it. They spent the rest of the drive in silence. When they arrived at the estate, Evelyn went straight to her room without another word. Daniel retreated to his quarters and started preparing. At 4 p.m., his encrypted phone buzzed. Report status. Subject removed as CEO. Chen in control. Requesting permission to share evidence files. The response took longer than usual. When it came, it was terse. Negative. Operational security paramount. She has leverage we need, won't cooperate without full disclosure. Then find another way. Files stay classified. Daniel stared at the message. He could follow orders and lose Evelyn's cooperation, or he could ignore orders and give her the truth. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made standing over her grave, that he'd find the people responsible and make them answer for what they'd done. He deleted the messages and started copying files onto an encrypted drive. At 7 p.m., he knocked on Evelyn's door. She answered immediately, still in her business clothes, but with her shoes off and her hair down. You came. I said I would. He held up the drive. Everything I have. 3 years of investigation, documents, recordings, financial trails, all of it. She took the drive like it was fragile. And your people? They approve this? They don't know I'm doing it. And when they find out, there'll be consequences. Why risk it? Because you're right. If we're going to do this, we do it together. No more secrets. He met her eyes. Besides, Sarah would have wanted this. She believed in the truth more than she believed in following rules. Evelyn inserted this drive into her laptop. Files began loading, hundreds of them, organized by date and category. She started reading, her expression growing darker with each document. This is worse than I thought, she said after 20 minutes. Keep reading. It gets worse. An hour later, she'd gone through half the files. Weapons sales to terrorist groups. Money laundering through legitimate contracts. Connections between Marcus and people in government who benefited from perpetual conflict. And buried in the middle of it all, a pattern Sarah had noticed but hadn't lived long enough to prove. The accidents, Evelyn said quietly, they're not random. No. Sarah documented 12 people who died in the 3 years before her own death, all of them contractors or employees who'd worked on sensitive projects, all ruled accidents or natural causes. My father makes 13. Yes. She closed the laptop. We need more than this. Documents can be faked. Financial records can be explained away as errors. We need something concrete, something that ties Marcus directly to these deaths. I've been trying to find that for 3 years. Then we try harder. She stood and started pacing. Marcus is confident now, thinks he's neutralized me. That makes him vulnerable. How? Confident people get sloppy. They stop covering their tracks as carefully. She stopped at the window, looking out at the dark grounds. The gala is tomorrow night. Different venue, but same crowd. Defense contractors, military brass, politicians. Marcus will be there, celebrating his victory. So? So while he's busy accepting congratulations, we'll be busy accessing his systems. finding the evidence he thinks he's hidden. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. That's not a plan. That's suicide. It's an opportunity. The building will be mostly empty during the gala. Security focused on the event, not the offices. If we can get into Marcus's private files, they're encrypted, air-gapped from the main network. You'd need physical access to his terminal, and even then, can you get past the encryption? He could. That was the problem. It's not about capability, it's about risk. If Marcus catches us, he won't be there. He'll be at the gala. That's the point. He'll have people watching the building, security, loyalists. And even if we get in, what do we do with what we find? We can't exactly present illegally obtained evidence to law enforcement. We don't need law enforcement, we need leverage. Evelyn turned to face him. Marcus killed my father. I know it, you know it, but we can't prove it through normal channels. So we find proof our own way, then we use it to force him out, make him confess or resign or run. I don't care which. This isn't how investigations work. This isn't an investigation anymore. This is war, and I'm tired of losing. Daniel recognized the look in her eyes. He'd seen it in his own mirror after Sarah died, grief hardening into something sharp and dangerous, desperation disguised as determination. Evelyn, listen to me. No, you listen. I've played by the rules my entire life, did everything right. Degrees from the right schools, positions in the right companies, perfect record. And where did it get me? My father's dead, my company's been stolen, and the man responsible is celebrating. Her voice cracked. I'm done being smart. I'm done being careful. I want justice, and if that means breaking into Marcus's office and taking what we need, then that's what we're doing. And if we get caught, then we get caught. At least I'll know I tried. It was a terrible plan. Reckless, desperate, likely to end in disaster. Everything Daniel's training told him to reject. But it was also their best chance. Marcus was confident, distracted, focused on consolidating his political victory. His guard would be down. And Daniel had 3 years of building layouts, security patterns, and access codes memorized. If we do this, he said slowly, we do it my way, carefully, professionally. No improvising, no emotional decisions. You follow my lead exactly. I can do that. Can you? Because 5 minutes ago you were talking about charging in for justice. I can be disciplined when I need to be. Prove it. Tell me right now, what's the goal of this operation? Specific, measurable outcome. She thought for a moment. Access Marcus's private files. Copy everything. Get out without being detected. And if we're detected, we abort and run. Even if we're close to getting what we need, even then. She met his eyes. I'm angry, Daniel. Not stupid. I won't throw away everything on a bad gamble. He studied her face, looking for the cracks that would appear when pressure hit, found some. She was holding on by threads, but also found steel underneath. All right, we'll need equipment, access cards, a way to bypass biometric locks without triggering alerts. I have access cards. I'm still a board member. Your card will log your entry. That's evidence you were there. Then we use yours. Your janitorial credentials should still work. Daniel considered that. His access had never been revoked. Maintenance staff were invisible. Their comings and goings barely monitored. That might work, but we'll need to move fast, in and out in under 30 minutes. Can you crack his encryption in 30 minutes? If I know what I'm looking for. Do you know how he structures his files? No, but I know someone who might. She pulled out her phone and made a call. James, it's Evelyn Cross. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Did you mean what you said at the gala about helping? Daniel couldn't hear the response, but he saw Evelyn's expression shift. Good. Then I need information. Your father's worked with Marcus for years. He must know something about how Marcus organizes his personal files. Security protocols, password habits, anything. A pause. I understand the risk, but this is important. More important than politics or job security. Another pause. Thank you. Tomorrow morning. Your apartment, not a public place. And James? Don't tell anyone about this call. She hung up. James says his father keeps notes. Detailed documentation of every executive in the company, Insurance policy in case anyone tries to push him out. Will he help us? James will. His father's too scared, but James is young enough to still believe in doing the right thing. She checked her watch. It's late. We should both get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Daniel stood to leave, then paused at the door. Evelyn, this plan, breaking into Marcus's office, it's dangerous. If something goes wrong, I know, but doing nothing is more dangerous. She managed a tired smile. Get some rest, Daniel. We'll need to be sharp tomorrow. Back in his quarters, Daniel sent one final message to his handler. Initiating direct action. Tomorrow night, we'll report results. The response was immediate. Negative. Stand down. Await instructions. Can't. Window closing. Chen consolidating power. Read. This is a direct order. Do not engage. Daniel powered down the phone without responding. He'd followed orders for 3 years. Waited patiently, built his cover, played the long game. And Sarah was still dead. Evelyn's father was still dead. Marcus was still winning. Tomorrow night, that changed. He pulled out Sarah's photo one more time. I'm sorry, he said to her frozen smile. I'm breaking protocol, going off script, but you'd understand. You always did. The photo didn't answer, but Daniel could almost hear her voice anyway, saying what she'd always said when he worried about breaking rules. Sometimes the right thing and the smart thing aren't the same. You've got to choose which one you can live with. Tomorrow night, he'd choose right. And whatever came after, he'd deal with it then. James Whitmore Jr. lived in a converted loft in Tribeca, the kind of space that cost more per month than most people made in a year. When he opened the door at 9 a.m., he looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hand shook slightly as he gestured them inside. You're sure you weren't followed? He asked, checking the hallway before closing the door. We're sure, Evelyn said. Do you have what I asked for? James led them to a dining table covered in notebooks and printed documents. My father keeps everything, every conversation, every meeting, every detail about every executive. He says it's professional thoroughness. I think it's paranoia. He picked up one of the notebooks. But it works in our favor today. Daniel examined the documents while James explained. Marcus Chen's security protocols were extensive but predictable. 3-factor authentication on his personal terminal, biometric scan plus password plus physical keycard. His office had motion sensors but no cameras. Marcus was too paranoid about being recorded himself. The password changes every week, James said. But my father documented the pattern. Marcus uses variations on his daughter's name and birthday. She died when she was 7. Car accident. Evelyn looked up sharply. I didn't know Marcus had a daughter. Nobody does. He doesn't talk about it, but my father says it's the only personal thing Marcus has ever cared about. James pulled out another document. Current password should be some combination of Elena2019 with special characters. The biometric is his right thumbprint, and the keycard... He hesitated. What? Daniel asked. He keeps it on him. Always. Even at events, even sleeping, supposedly. Evelyn swore quietly. Then we can't get in. Maybe we can. James pulled out his phone and showed them a photo. Security duplicates exist for every executive key card. Emergency access in case someone loses theirs or gets locked out. They're kept in the security office, 4th floor, locked cabinet. And you know this how? My father had me get him a duplicate once when he lost his at a conference. I watched the security chief pull it from the cabinet. James zoomed in on the photo, showing a key code panel. 6-digit code. I don't know what it is, but the chief is old school. Wrote it on a post-it inside his desk drawer. Daniel felt something like respect for the kid. That's good work. That's desperation. If my father finds out I'm helping you, I'm disowned. If Marcus finds out... James didn't finish the sentence. Why are you doing this? Evelyn asked quietly. Because someone should, and everyone else is too scared or too complicit. He gathered the notebooks. My father's a coward. He knows what's happening and does nothing. I don't want to be like that. They spent another hour going over details. Building layout, security patrol patterns, camera blind spots. James had been paying attention for years, accumulating knowledge he'd never thought he'd use. The gala starts at 7, he said. Most security will be focused on the event venue across town, But there's still overnight staff at headquarters, janitors, a few engineers working late, security patrol. What about Marcus's personal security? 2 bodyguards, always with him, but they'll be at the gala. He feels safe there. Important people, witnesses, his territory. Daniel checked his watch. We should go. The longer we're here, the more risk someone notices. James walked them to the door. Be careful. Marcus didn't get where he is by being sloppy. If he even suspects you're onto him. We know, Evelyn said. Thank you, James, for everything. Just promise me something. When this is over, when you expose what he's done, make sure people know my father could have helped and chose not to. He doesn't get to pretend he was ignorant. I promise. Outside, the city was bright and cold. Daniel and Evelyn walked 3 blocks before speaking, making sure they weren't being followed. That kid's going to get himself killed, Daniel said. That kid gave us a chance. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter against the wind. We need to get that duplicate key card. Without it, we're dead in the water. The security office will have cameras. But the 4th floor has maintenance closets. You know the building better than anyone. Is there a way to get to that office without being seen on camera? Daniel mentally mapped the building. He'd spent 8 months learning its layout, memorizing blind spots and access routes. There's a service corridor that connects to the security office. Old infrastructure from when the building was renovated. No cameras because it's technically off limits. Asbestos concerns. Can we access it? With my old credentials, maybe. But Evelyn, this is getting complicated. Multiple points of failure, multiple risks. If any one thing goes wrong, then we adapt. Like you said last night, carefully, professionally. She stopped walking and faced him. I know this is dangerous. I know it might not work. But doing nothing guarantees Marcus wins. At least this way we're fighting back. They returned to the estate and spent the afternoon preparing. Daniel assembled equipment from his storage locker, tools he'd kept hidden during his janitorial cover, lockpicks, signal jammers, a portable drive capable of copying encrypted data faster than standard hardware. Evelyn worked on their cover story. If anyone asked why they weren't at the gala, she'd cite exhaustion from the board meeting, need for privacy. Her absence would be noted but not suspicious, the defeated CEO licking her wounds at home. At 5 p.m., Margaret knocked on Daniel's door. Mrs. Cross asked me to tell you dinner will be ready at 6. She also said to dress casually. You're staying in tonight. Thank you, Margaret. The house manager hesitated. Mr. Reed, if I may, Mrs. Cross seems different today. Focused, almost calm. After everything that happened yesterday, I would have expected... Expected what? I don't know. Anger, maybe. Sadness. But she seems determined, like she's made a decision about something. She has. She's decided to fight back. Margaret's expression shifted, something like approval crossing her features. Good. The Cross family didn't build this company by accepting defeat. She started to leave, then paused. Be careful tonight. Whatever you're planning. We're not planning anything, just a quiet evening at home. Of course, my mistake. But her eyes said she knew better. They ate dinner in near silence, both too focused on what was coming to make conversation. At 7:30, Daniel checked the news feeds. The gala was underway, photos already circulating on social media. Marcus in a tuxedo, shaking hands with a senator. Patricia Reeves laughing at something a general said. The celebration of power and money and influence. They're all there, Evelyn said, looking at the photos over his shoulder. Everyone who matters. Which means the building is vulnerable, but also means if we get caught, there's no one friendly to run interference. Then we don't get caught. They left the estate at 8 p.m. in Daniel's car, the older sedan he'd used during his janitorial cover, unremarkable and forgettable. The drive into the city took 40 minutes, traffic lighter than usual because of the gala pulling the important people elsewhere. Cross Defense headquarters looked different at night. The lower floors were dark, only emergency lighting visible. Upper floors showed scattered office lights, engineers working late, projects that couldn't wait until morning. The lobby security desk was manned by a single guard, a young guy Daniel recognized from his maintenance days. You remember the patrol schedule? Evelyn asked as they parked 3 blocks away. Every hour on the hour, 10-minute circuit through the main floors. Security offices checked at the start of each patrol. So we have a 50-minute window once the patrol leaves. In theory, if the guard is punctual, if there are no variations, if nothing unexpected happens. You're very reassuring. I'm very realistic. Daniel pulled out his phone and checked the time. Next patrol starts in 12 minutes. We wait until he leaves the security office, then we move. They sat in the dark car and watched the building. At 8:47, the guard emerged from the main entrance and began his circuit. Daniel and Evelyn gave him a 2-minute lead, then approached the building from the side entrance, the one maintenance staff used, the one with fewer cameras. Daniel's old access card worked on the first try. The door clicked open and they slipped inside. The service corridor was exactly as he remembered it. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, the smell of old building and industrial cleaner. Emergency lighting cast everything in sickly yellow. Their footsteps echoed despite their attempts at silence. "How far?" Evelyn whispered. 200 feet. Door at the end connects to the 4th-floor hallway, 20 feet from the security office. They moved quickly, Daniel leading because he knew the route. Behind them, the door they'd entered through was already closing, sealing them inside the corridor. No turning back now. The door at the far end was locked, but Daniel had picked worse. 30 seconds with his tools and the lock clicked open. He eased the door open an inch, checking the hallway. Empty. The security office was visible at the end of the hall, door closed, light off. Nobody home. "Stay close," he breathed. They moved fast and low, reaching the security office in seconds. This lock was more complex, electronic deadbolt with a manual override. Daniel bypassed it using a signal jammer and a shunt wire, tricks he'd learned in a different life. Inside, the security office was cramped and cluttered. Multiple monitors showed camera feeds from throughout the building. Daniel's eyes automatically tracked the patrol guard's location, 3rd floor, moving methodically through the executive wing. "Where's the cabinet?" Evelyn asked. Daniel pointed to a locked metal cabinet against the far wall. James said the code was in the desk drawer. Evelyn opened drawers while Daniel kept watch on the monitors. The patrol guard was moving faster than expected, already finishing the 3rd floor, heading for the stairs. "Evelyn, we need to hurry." "I'm looking. There's a lot of papers." "Wait. Got it." She held up a Post-it note with 6 digits written in faded ink. "Someone really needs to teach these people about security." She punched in the code. The cabinet clicked open, revealing rows of access cards, each labeled with an executive name. She found Marcus Chen's duplicate and pocketed it. "Let's go." They were halfway to the door when the lights in the hallway outside suddenly blazed to life. Daniel froze, pulling Evelyn behind a filing cabinet. On the monitors, he could see the patrol guard had deviated from his route. He was heading up the stairs toward the 4th floor, talking into his radio. "Yeah, I saw something on the feed. 4th floor hallway. Probably nothing, but I'm checking it out." "We triggered a motion sensor," Daniel whispered. "You said there were no sensors in this corridor." "In the corridor, not in the hallway. We must have broken the beam when we crossed." The guard's footsteps were getting closer. Daniel calculated angles and timing. If the guard checked the security office, they were caught. If he just swept the hallway and left, they might survive this. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Daniel's hand moved to his pocket, where he'd stashed a weapon he'd hoped he wouldn't need. Beside him, Evelyn's breathing had gone shallow. On the monitors, he could see the guard's shadow in the hallway, hand on his radio. "Security office is dark," the guard said into his radio. "Doors closed. Everything looks normal." "Check it anyway. Protocol." "Copy that." The door handle started to turn. Daniel moved on instinct, pulling Evelyn behind the door just as it opened. The guard stepped inside, reaching for the light switch. In the 2 seconds before the lights came on, Daniel made a decision he'd later question but couldn't avoid. He grabbed the guard from behind, one arm around his throat, applying pressure to the carotid arteries. Not a choke, a blood choke. The guard struggled for 5 seconds, then went limp. Daniel lowered him gently to the floor. "What did you do?" Evelyn hissed. "Put him to sleep. He'll wake up in a few minutes with a headache." Daniel was already moving, grabbing zip ties from the guard's own belt. He secured the man's hands and feet, then gagged him with a torn strip of his own shirt. "We need to leave. Now." They ran down the hallway, abandoning stealth for speed. Behind them, the guard's radio crackled with his partner's voice asking for status. In 30 seconds, maybe less, alarms would sound. The service corridor seemed longer on the way back. Daniel's mind raced through contingencies. If they got caught now, there was no explanation that would work. Breaking and entering, assault on a security guard, this had gone way past corporate espionage. They burst out of the side entrance into the cold night air. No alarms yet, but that wouldn't last. Daniel grabbed Evelyn's hand and they ran for the car, 3 blocks feeling like 3 miles. They were half a mile away when Daniel heard the sirens starting. "Did we just assault someone?" Evelyn asked, breathing hard. "I subdued a potential threat. There's a difference." "Is there? Legally?" "Probably not." Daniel turned onto a side street, putting distance between them and the headquarters. "But we got what we came for." Evelyn pulled out the duplicate keycard, staring at it like it might explode. "This better be worth it." "It will be. Once we get into Marcus's office, once we see what he's hiding, we have another problem. That guard saw us. Or saw you, at least. They'll review the footage, see us entering the building. No cameras in the service corridor, and I kept my face down in the hallway. You were behind me the whole time. So you're on camera, I'm not. That's how it worked out." She was quiet for a moment. "You took the risk. Protected me from exposure. That's the job." The job was supposed to be staying in the background and looking forgettable, not choking out security guards. Daniel pulled onto the highway, heading back toward Westchester. "Plans change. We adapt." "Who are you, Daniel? Really?" "Because janitors don't move like that. They don't have training in hand-to-hand combat. They don't carry weapons." "I told you. I've been investigating this company for 3 years. You think I did that without learning how to protect myself?" "There's protecting yourself and there's what I just saw. That was military training. Special forces, maybe. Black ops." She turned to face him fully. "I need the truth. All of it. No more deflections." Daniel drove in silence for a mile, weighing his options. He'd already broken protocol by sharing the files, already violated orders by moving forward with tonight's operation. What was one more breach? "I was military, long time ago. Force recon, then some other things that didn't have official names." He kept his eyes on the road. "After I got out, I freelanced. Private security, investigative work, things that needed someone with particular skills. And when Sarah died, I signed on with an organization that investigates corruption in defense contracting. They're not official, not government exactly, but connected to people who care about this stuff." He glanced at her. "They put me in place at Cross Defense to gather evidence. The marriage was my idea, a way to get closer to the target. Marcus, and whoever else is involved. This conspiracy is bigger than one man, Evelyn. Marcus is the operational lead, but he's got backing from somewhere. People protecting him, funding him, making sure his activities stay hidden. So your plan was to marry me, use me for access, and then what? Disappear when you had what you needed?" "The plan was to gather evidence, build a case, hand it over to my people, and let them handle the prosecution. You were never supposed to know I existed. But then I found my father's files, started asking questions." "Started making yourself a target," Daniel corrected. "You were supposed to take the buyout, walk away, maybe run the company from a distance, while Marcus handled day-to-day operations. Instead, you fought back, and now you're in the same danger your father was." Evelyn laughed bitterly. "So you decided to help me out of guilt?" "I decided to help you because you deserve the truth about what happened to your father. And because—" He stopped. "Because what?" "Because I didn't help Sarah when she needed it. I was supposed to be her backup on that investigation, but I got pulled away on another assignment, told her to wait until I got back. She didn't wait, and she died alone." The car fell silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt. Evelyn stared out the window at the dark landscape passing by. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "Don't be. It was my failure, not yours. I'm not apologizing for you. I'm apologizing for using you the same way you were using me. We're both guilty of that." Daniel took the exit toward the estate. "So where does that leave us?" "Breaking into Marcus's office tomorrow night with a stolen key card and questionable ethics." She almost smiled. "I'd say we're even." Back at the estate, they went immediately to Daniel's quarters. He pulled out his laptop and the portable drive, preparing for tomorrow night's data extraction. Evelyn sat in the chair by the window, studying the duplicate key card like it held all the answers. "What time does the gala end tomorrow?" she asked. "Official end is 11 p.m., but the important people usually stay later. Networking, backroom deals. Marcus won't leave before midnight. So we have from 7 to midnight. 5 hours. We won't need 5 hours, 30 minutes in his office, tops. Any longer, and we're asking to get caught. And the data? You can copy everything in 30 minutes?" Daniel showed her the portable drive. "This can clone a hard drive in under 20 minutes. We just need to access his terminal, bypass the encryption, and let it work." "You make it sound simple." "The technical part is simple. It's everything else that's complicated." Evelyn stood and walked to the desk, looking at the scattered equipment. "After tomorrow night, after we get this evidence, what happens then?" "We analyze what we find, build a case, figure out who else is involved and how deep this goes. And then? Then we decide how to use it. Could go to law enforcement, could go public, could use it as leverage to force Marcus out." He met her eyes. "What do you want to happen?" "I want my father's killers in prison. I want cross-defense cleaned up and restored to what it was supposed to be. I want everyone who knew about this and did nothing to face consequences." She paused. "But mostly I want to sleep at night without wondering if I'm next." "That's fair. What do you want, Daniel?" He thought about Sarah's photo in his wallet, about the 3 years he'd spent chasing ghosts and building covers, about the promise he'd made and the rules he'd broken. "I want the truth. Whatever it is, whoever it hurts. I'm tired of secrets." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then tomorrow night, we get the truth. And whatever comes after, we deal with it together. Partners?" "Partners." She left him alone with his equipment and his thoughts. Daniel spent the next 2 hours running scenarios, planning contingencies, preparing for every possible complication. At midnight, his encrypted phone buzzed with a message from his handler. "Where are you? Report immediately." He ignored it. Another message came through. "Read, you're off mission. Pull back now or face extraction." He powered down the phone and removed the battery. Whatever consequences were coming from his organization, they'd have to wait. Tomorrow night was too important. He pulled out Sarah's photo one last time. "I'm close," he told her image. "Closer than you ever got. And I'm not stopping now. Not for orders, not for protocol, not for anything." She smiled back at him from that frozen beach moment, forever 28, forever certain the truth mattered more than safety. Daniel put the photo away and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would be the longest day of his life, culminating in a break-in that could either expose a massive conspiracy or get them both killed. He was betting on exposure, but he'd prepared for both. At 3 a.m., he gave up on sleep and started running final checks on his equipment. At 5, Evelyn knocked on his door, looking as tired as he felt. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Too much to think about. Want coffee?" They went downstairs to the kitchen, where Margaret was already preparing breakfast despite the early hour. She took one look at them and started brewing a full pot. "You both look terrible," she said matter-of-factly. "Long night," Evelyn replied, "and a longer day ahead, I suspect." Margaret set out cups and cream. "Whatever you're planning, I hope you know what you're doing." "We don't," Daniel said, "but we're doing it anyway." Margaret poured coffee for both of them. Mr. Cross, Evelyn's father, he used to say the same thing. "I don't know if this will work, Margaret, but I have to try." That was the night before he confronted the board about some contract he thought was wrong. Military sales to a country with a bad human rights record. Evelyn looked up sharply. "I didn't know about that." He kept it quiet, thought he could resolve it internally, but the board voted him down, told him to mind his own business. Margaret's expression darkened. That was 3 weeks before he died. "Did he say what country? What contract?" "Yemen. Some kind of surveillance system. He thought it would be used to target civilians, journalists. He wanted cross-defense to pull out of the deal." Daniel and Evelyn exchanged looks. Yemen. The same country Sarah had been investigating. The same country where weapons sold through Marcus's network had ended up in the hands of insurgents. "Margaret," Daniel said carefully, "did my father mention Marcus Chen specifically?" "Not to me, but I heard him on the phone one night, very late. He was angry, said something about betrayal, about trust, about not recognizing the man he'd built this company with." She refilled their cups. The next morning he seemed fine, told me he'd resolved it. 2 weeks later he was dead. Evelyn's hands were shaking. She set down her coffee cup before she spilled it. Thank you for telling me this. I should have told you sooner, but I was scared. Still am. Margaret looked at both of them. Be careful today. People who cross Marcus Chen tend to have accidents. After breakfast, they spent the day in careful preparation. Evelyn made appearances around the estate, visible to staff, establishing her presence at home. Daniel reviewed the building schematics one more time, memorizing routes and backup plans. At 6 p.m., they received confirmation the gala had started. Social media lit up with photos. Marcus holding court, Patricia schmoozing donors, Gerard demonstrating some new weapons system on a tablet. At 6:30, they left for the city in separate cars again. Daniel went first, taking the route that would put him near headquarters by 7. Evelyn followed 20 minutes later, approaching from a different direction. The building was darker than the night before. Fewer lights in the upper floors, fewer engineers working late. Everyone important was at the gala. Daniel parked and checked his equipment one final time. Lockpicks, signal jammer, portable drive, the duplicate keycard Evelyn would bring, everything necessary to commit corporate espionage and possibly treason. His phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. In position, ready when you are. He typed back, meet at the service entrance in 5 minutes. 4 minutes later, they stood together in the shadows near the side door. Evelyn handed him the duplicate keycard. Their fingers touched briefly, both cold despite the mild evening. Last chance to back out, Daniel said. Not happening. If we get caught, we won't. She checked her watch. Security patrol just started. We have 45 minutes. Daniel swiped his old maintenance card. The door opened with a soft click. They stepped inside and the building swallowed them whole. The service corridor felt different tonight, more oppressive, like the walls were closer. Their footsteps echoed louder despite their caution. 29th floor, us, Evelyn whispered. Executive wing. They took the service elevator, slower than the main elevators, but less likely to be monitored. The ride up felt endless. Daniel watched the floor numbers tick by, mentally mapping the route from elevator to Marcus's office. The elevator stopped on 14. They both froze as the doors slid open. The 14th floor, where Sarah had worked, where she'd spent her last days gathering evidence that would get her killed. Nobody got on. The doors started to close, but Daniel saw something in the hallway. A light that shouldn't be on. A door that should be closed. Wait, he said, jamming his hand into the elevator door. Something's wrong. Daniel, we don't have time. Sarah's old office. Someone's in there. He stepped out before Evelyn could stop him, moved quickly down the hallway toward the light. The office door was ajar, and inside he could hear someone moving around, papers rustling, drawers opening. Daniel pushed the door open fully. Gerard Blackwood stood at Sarah's old desk, rifling through files. He looked up, surprised, then his expression hardened into something dangerous. Well, Gerard said, slowly closing the file drawer, this is unexpected. Behind Daniel, Evelyn had followed. She saw Gerard and swore quietly. What are you doing here? Gerard asked. Shouldn't you be at home, Evelyn, licking your wounds after that board meeting? I could ask you the same question. Why are you going through Sarah Mitchell's old office? She's been dead for 3 years. Routine audit, making sure old files are properly archived. At 7 p.m. on a gala night. Sure. Daniel stepped further into the room, watching Gerard's hands. The man was armed. Daniel could see the outline of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. What are you really looking for? Gerard's smile was cold. I think the better question is, what are you looking for, Mr. Reed? Or should I call you by your real name? Daniel Hayes, formerly Captain Hayes, Marine Force Recon, currently employed by a private intelligence firm investigating cross-defense. The room went silent. Evelyn looked at Daniel. Hayes? Reed is an alias, Gerard continued. Has been for 3 years. Impressive cover, I'll admit. You had us all fooled. Well, almost all of us. He pulled a phone from his pocket. Marcus has been suspicious since the wedding. Ran a deep background check. Found some interesting gaps in your employment history. Daniel's mind raced. If Marcus knew his real identity, then this whole operation was compromised. The break-in tonight, the evidence they were gathering, all of it was walking into a trap. When did he figure it out? Daniel asked, keeping his voice level. 2 days ago, right after the board meeting. He was going to have you arrested tonight during the gala. Public spectacle, corporate spy caught red-handed. Gerard's smile widened. But then we realized we could use you. Let you break into his office, let you copy whatever files you think are damning. Then we catch you with stolen data, arrest you for industrial espionage, and Evelyn loses her last shred of credibility. You're using us as bait, Evelyn said. I'm neutralizing a threat. There's a difference. Gerard raised his phone. Now, you have 2 choices. Come quietly, and we'll make this easy. Or resist, and things get messy. Daniel calculated angles. Gerard was armed and trained, but he was also alone and confident. Too confident. Who else knows? Daniel asked. Just Marcus and me. We didn't want to spook you before you made your move. That was a mistake. Gerard had just admitted they were working alone, outside official channels, which meant whatever happened in this room, there were no witnesses. Evelyn, Daniel said quietly, leave. Now. I'm not leaving you. This isn't negotiable. Walk away. Gerard laughed. She's not going anywhere. She's complicit in whatever scheme you're running. Breaking and entering, theft of company property. Daniel moved. 1 second, Gerard was holding his phone, confident and in control. The next second, Daniel had closed the distance, knocked the phone from his hand, and delivered an elbow strike to his solar plexus that drove the air from his lungs. Gerard tried to draw his weapon. Daniel caught his wrist, twisted, and the gun clattered to the floor. They grappled, crashing into Sarah's old desk, scattering papers. Run! Daniel shouted at Evelyn. But she didn't run. Instead, she grabbed Gerard's fallen phone and started taking photos of the files he'd been searching through. Evidence of what he'd been looking for, what he'd been trying to hide. Gerard broke free from Daniel's grip and drove a punch into his ribs. Pain exploded through Daniel's side. He stumbled back, giving Gerard space to recover. You're making this worse, Gerard growled, advancing. Marcus was willing to let Evelyn walk away with a settlement. Now she's going to prison with you. He threw another punch. Daniel blocked it, countered with a jab to Gerard's throat that made him gag. They traded blows, both trained, both determined. The office became a battlefield of overturned furniture and scattered files. Evelyn was still photographing documents, working quickly and methodically, even as the fight raged around her. Gerard managed to get behind Daniel, wrapping an arm around his throat. A proper choke this time, not the blood choke Daniel had used on the security guard. Air cut off, pressure building. Daniel dropped his weight and drove his elbow backward into Gerard's kidney. Once, twice, 3 times. The grip loosened. Daniel spun free and delivered a roundhouse kick that sent Gerard crashing through the office door into the hallway. Got it, Evelyn said, holding up the phone. Everything he was looking at, files on Yemen, surveillance contracts, names. Alarms started blaring. Gerard had triggered them somehow. Maybe a panic button, maybe his phone connecting to security. Didn't matter. The building was going into lockdown. We need to leave, Daniel said. Right now. They ran for the service elevator, Gerard shouting behind them. Daniel hit the button for the ground floor, praying it would work before the lockdown completed. The doors slid closed just as Gerard reached them, his face twisted with rage. The elevator descended. Inside, Daniel and Evelyn leaned against opposite walls, breathing hard. You lied about your name, she said. Yes. What else did you lie about? Does it matter right now? It might, if we're about to be arrested for corporate espionage. The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened to reveal the lobby swarming with security guards. Daniel grabbed Evelyn's hand. Run! They didn't make it 10 feet before security closed in. Daniel shoved Evelyn toward the emergency exit while he took the opposite direction, drawing the guards' attention. Shouts echoed through the marble lobby, footsteps thundering as 4 guards converged on him. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and swung it in a wide arc, forcing them back. The impact sent 1 guard sprawling. Another grabbed for his weapon, but Daniel was already moving, using the extinguisher as a battering ram to create an opening. Stop right there! Daniel didn't stop. He crashed through the emergency exit into the stairwell, taking the steps 3 at a time downward. The guards followed, their radios crackling with updates. More would be coming. This building had dozens of security personnel on overnight shift. He hit the basement level and burst through the door into the parking garage. Evelyn was supposed to be heading for the service exit on the east side, but Daniel couldn't lead the guards to her. He ran west instead, drawing them deeper into the garage. A security vehicle screeched around the corner, headlights blinding. Daniel dove behind a concrete pillar as the vehicle skidded to a stop. 2 more guards emerged, weapons drawn. "Hands where we can see them." Daniel raised his hands slowly, then dropped and rolled as flashlight swept his position. He came up running, zigzagging between parked cars. Gunshots cracked through their garage, warning shots, not aimed to kill. They wanted him alive, which gave him an advantage. He reached a maintenance access door he'd memorized during his 8 months as a janitor, locked, but his picks were still in his pocket. 30 seconds of fumbling while guards closed in, then the lock gave way and he was through. The tunnels beneath Cross Defense Headquarters were a maze of pipes and electrical conduits, built when the building was new and mostly forgotten since. Daniel navigated by memory and instinct, moving through darkness with only emergency lighting to guide him. Behind him, the guards hesitated at the tunnel entrance. Their radios squawked questions they couldn't answer. These tunnels weren't in the security plans, weren't part of their patrol routes. Daniel used that hesitation to put distance between them. He followed the main tunnel east, then north, circling back toward where Evelyn should be. His ribs ached where Gerard had hit him, his lungs burned from the sprint, but he couldn't stop. The tunnel opened into a sub-basement beneath the original building foundation. Daniel climbed a ladder to street level and emerged from a maintenance hatch 2 blocks from headquarters. Sirens filled the night. Police cars were arriving at the main entrance, lights painting the street in red and blue. Whatever story Marcus was telling them, it had them responding in force. Daniel's phone buzzed. "Evelyn, where are you?" He typed back. 2 blocks north. You clear?" "Waiting at the rendezvous." "Hurry." They'd agreed on a backup meeting point, a parking garage 6 blocks away, anonymous and unconnected to either of them. Daniel moved through shadows, avoiding the main streets where police were setting up a perimeter. He found Evelyn on the 3rd level of the garage, sitting in her car with the engine running and her hands shaking on the steering wheel. "Are you hurt?" she asked as he climbed into the passenger seat. "I'll live." "You?" Terrified, but not hurt. She pulled out Gerard's phone. "I got photos of everything he was looking at, documents, emails, financial records. Whatever he was trying to hide, we have it now. We need to disappear. If Marcus knows my real identity, he knows where we live. The estate isn't safe." "Where do we go?" "I have a safe house. Brooklyn, under a different name. We can regroup there, figure out our next move." Evelyn pulled out of the garage and headed south. Behind them, the sirens were multiplying. More police, more security. The full weight of Cross Defense's resources mobilizing to find them. "They're going to label us fugitives," Evelyn said quietly. "Corporate spies, thieves. Marcus will spin this as industrial espionage." "Let him. We have evidence now. Real evidence, not just suspicions. Evidence we obtained illegally. It won't hold up in court." "Maybe not. But it'll hold up in the court of public opinion, and it'll give law enforcement probable cause to dig deeper." They drove in tense silence through Brooklyn, finally pulling up to a nondescript apartment building in Sunset Park. Daniel led Evelyn to a 3rd-floor unit, unlocking 3 separate deadbolts before pushing the door open. Inside was sparse but functional. A bed, a table, a kitchenette, windows overlooking the street with heavy curtains drawn. And in the closet, equipment Daniel had stashed during his years undercover, computers, surveillance gear, weapons he'd hoped never to use. Evelyn sat heavily on the bed while Daniel secured the door and windows. Then he pulled out his laptop and connected Gerard's phone. Let's see what he was so desperate to hide. The files were damning. Emails between Gerard and Marcus discussing weapon shipments to Yemen, surveillance systems sold to regimes known for human rights abuses, contracts structured to avoid oversight, and buried in the middle, a medical report. Daniel opened it and felt his blood run cold. "What is it?" Evelyn asked, moving to look over his shoulder. "Your father's autopsy, the official one." He scrolled down to the toxicology section. Clean, no foreign substances, no irregularities. But look at this. He pulled up another file, a second toxicology report from a different lab. Same samples, different results. This one showed traces of a compound Daniel recognized from his military days. "Potassium chloride," he said quietly. Injected in high doses, it causes cardiac arrest. Mimics a natural heart attack perfectly, and it's nearly impossible to detect unless you're specifically looking for it. Evelyn's hand covered her mouth. They murdered him, poisoned him, and paid for a cover-up. Not just paid for it, look at the signature on the second report. Daniel zoomed in on the bottom of the document. Dr. Michael Reeves, Patricia's brother, he's the county medical examiner. She was in on it. The CFO helped murder my father. Her, Marcus, Gerard, probably others. Daniel kept scrolling through files. But here's what they were really protecting. He opened a spreadsheet that made Evelyn gasp. Hundreds of transactions, millions of dollars moving through shell companies, weapons sales to groups the U.S. was actively fighting against, kickbacks to government officials who approved the contracts. A network of corruption that stretched from cross-defense to the Pentagon to foreign insurgents. This isn't just corporate fraud, Evelyn whispered. This is treason. Yes, and your father found it, started asking questions, so they killed him before he could expose it. And Sarah? Daniel found another file, an incident report about a contractor who'd been investigating irregularities in the Yemen contracts. The report recommended intervention to prevent disclosure. 3 weeks later, Sarah Mitchell had died in a car accident. They killed her too, probably the same way, made it look like an accident, covered their tracks. Daniel's voice was hollow. I spent 3 years looking for proof, and it was buried in Gerard's own files the whole time. Evelyn stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the Brooklyn streets below. What do we do with this? We can't go to the police. Marcus probably has them looking for us right now. We can't go to the FBI without more evidence, and we can't exactly walk into the media with illegally obtained files. We go to my handler, the people who put me in place to investigate cross-defense. They have channels, resources. You mean the handler you've been ignoring, the one who told you to stand down? Evelyn turned back to face him. Daniel, Hayes, whoever you are, you're not exactly in their good graces right now. She was right, as Daniel had violated every protocol, disobeyed direct orders, and compromised his entire operation. His organization might help, or they might cut him loose to protect themselves. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at the location from 3 years ago, 1 hour. Come alone. J.W. James Whitmore. It could be a trap, Evelyn said, reading over his shoulder. Or it could be help. James knows what his father documented. If he's willing to testify, then we have a credible witness who can corroborate what we found. Evelyn grabbed her coat. I'm coming with you. He said alone. And I don't care. We're partners, remember? No more solo operations. The location from 3 years ago was a coffee shop in Greenwich Village where Daniel had first met James's father to discuss cross-defense's culture. He'd been building his cover then, establishing his background as a janitor interested in joining the company. They arrived early and watched from across the street. The coffee shop was nearly empty at 10 p.m., just a barista wiping down tables, and 2 students studying in the corner. James appeared 5 minutes later looking even more scared than he had at his apartment. He ordered coffee he didn't drink and sat at a corner table. He's alone, Evelyn observed, that we can see. They crossed the street and entered the coffee shop. James looked up as they approached, relief and terror warring on his face. You came. Both of you. What's this about, James? Daniel asked, sitting across from him. My father knows. About the files, about what you're doing. Marcus called him tonight right after the break-in. Wanted to know if his documentation included anything about Yemen contracts or medical examiners. James's hands shook as he set down his coffee. My father denied everything. Said his notes were routine personnel management, but Marcus didn't believe him. Where's your father now? In hiding. He knows what happens to people who cross Marcus. He gave me something to give you. James pulled out a flash drive. Copies of everything he's documented over 30 years. Every meeting, every shady deal, every time Marcus bent the rules. He said if he's going down, everyone goes down. Daniel took the flash drive. Why the change of heart? Because Marcus threatened him. Told him to destroy the files or become part of the problem they were solving. James's voice cracked. My father's a coward, but he's not stupid. He knows what that means. Where is he? I can't tell you that, but he authorized me to testify. Everything he knows, everything he documented. I can put it on record. If you can guarantee protection. Evelyn leaned forward. James, if you do this, there's no going back. Marcus will come after you. Your career, your reputation, maybe your life. I know, but I can't live with doing nothing anymore. He looked at both of them. My father built his life on staying quiet, playing it safe, and now he's hiding in a motel, terrified for his life. That's not success. That's just slow failure. Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time it was his handler. Location compromised. Extract immediately. He showed it to Evelyn, who swore quietly. They're tracking us. Probably through my phone. Daniel pulled the battery out and dropped it on the table. We need to move. Now. They were halfway to the door when it crashed open. Marcus Chen stood in the entrance flanked by 4 private security contractors. Not police, not official personnel. Men who worked outside the law and asked no questions. Going somewhere? Marcus asked pleasantly. The coffee shop barista screamed. The students scrambled for the back exit. James froze in his chair. This is a public place, Marcus, Evelyn said, her voice steadier than she looked. You can't just… Can't what? Confront corporate spies who broke into my building and assaulted my head of security? Marcus smiled. I'm a victim here, Evelyn, defending my company from infiltrators. One of the contractors moved to flank them. Daniel calculated angles, 4 armed men, civilians present, limited exits. The odds were terrible. Let Evelyn and James go, Daniel said. Your problem is with me. My problem is with anyone who threatens cross-defense. That includes you, Mr. Hayes. Or is it Reed? I can never remember which identity you prefer. Marcus stepped further into the coffee shop. I admire the dedication. 3 years undercover, building a life, marrying the boss's daughter. Very committed. You murdered her father. I protected the company from a man who would have destroyed it over misplaced idealism. William Cross didn't understand the modern defense industry. Didn't understand that weapons don't care about politics or morality. They care about results. Marcus's expression hardened. He was going to expose contracts that keep this country safe, make enemies of allies, cost American lives to satisfy his conscience. He was going to expose you selling weapons to terrorists. Freedom fighters, terrorists. The labels change depending on who's writing the history. Marcus gestured to his contractors. Secure them. We'll sort this out at headquarters. The contractors moved forward. Daniel pushed Evelyn behind him, his mind racing through options. He couldn't fight 4 trained operators, not without casualties. And James was still frozen at the table, useless. Then the front window exploded. Glass showered inward as a black SUV crashed through the coffee shop facade. The contractors dove for cover as the vehicle skidded to a stop between them and Daniel's group. The back door flew open. Get in! Richard Pemberton shouted from the driver's seat. Daniel didn't question it. He grabbed Evelyn and James and shoved them into the SUV. Bullets sparked off the armored vehicle as Marcus's contractors opened fire. Richard floored the accelerator, and they crashed back through the destroyed storefront into the street. What the hell, Richard? Evelyn shouted from the back seat. Saving your life, you're welcome. Richard took a hard left, tires squealing. I've been tracking your phone since you left the estate. When I saw Marcus's people converging on that location, I figured you could use backup. How did you know? I'm not an idiot, Evelyn. I've known something was wrong since your father died. The clean autopsies, the convenient heart attack, the way Marcus moved so quickly to consolidate power. He glanced in the rearview mirror. I didn't have proof. Until tonight, when Gerard called in a panic about intruders finding his secret files. Daniel checked behind them. 2 more SUVs were giving chase, closing fast. Marcus wasn't giving up. Where are we going? Daniel asked. Federal Plaza, FBI field office. I made some calls tonight. Turns out they've been investigating cross-defense for months. They're very interested in what you found. We obtained it illegally, which is inadmissible in court, but perfect for establishing probable cause for warrants. You hand them what you found, they get legitimate authorization to seize everything. Richard took another sharp turn. It's the only play we have. Behind them, the pursuing SUVs closed to within 50 feet. One pulled alongside and rammed them. Metal shrieked. Richard fought to keep control. They're not going to let us get there, Evelyn said. Then we make them work for it. Richard pulled out a phone and made a call. "This is Richard Pemberton, attorney for Cross Defense Corporation. I'm being pursued by armed men through Lower Manhattan. My clients are in danger. We need police assistance immediately." He rattled off their location and direction. Within minutes, sirens joined the chase. NYPD patrol cars converged from multiple directions, cutting off the pursuing SUVs. Marcus's contractors broke off rather than engage police. The chase ended 6 blocks from Federal Plaza. Richard pulled into the underground parking garage and killed the engine. For a moment, nobody spoke. They just sat there, breathing hard, processing what had almost happened. "Did you really call the FBI?" Daniel finally asked. "I called everyone. FBI, SEC, Department of Defense Inspector General. Told them Cross Defense had a whistleblower ready to provide evidence of massive corruption." Richard turned in his seat. They were already investigating based on irregular contract patterns. "What you found tonight will be the key to unlocking the whole conspiracy." "But Marcus will run," Evelyn said. As soon as he realizes what's happening, he can't run far. "I froze his accounts this afternoon, used my authority as company counsel to flag suspicious transactions pending review. His money's locked down." Daniel looked at the elderly lawyer with new respect. "You've been planning this." "I've been waiting for someone brave enough or stupid enough to make a move against Marcus. You two qualified on both counts." Richard climbed out of the SUV. "Come on. There are some very patient FBI agents waiting upstairs who'd like to hear your story." The debriefing took 6 hours. Daniel, Evelyn, and James sat in separate rooms, recounting everything: the investigation, the break-in, the files they'd found, the confrontation with Gerard and Marcus. FBI agents cross-referenced their stories, examined the evidence, built a timeline of events. At 4 a.m., the lead agent, a woman named Morrison with tired eyes and a no-nonsense manner, gathered them in a conference room. "We've been investigating Cross Defense for 8 months," she said. "Suspected illegal weapons sales, money laundering, fraud. But we couldn't get past their legal protections. Corporate attorneys, classified contracts, government connections that made people nervous about pushing too hard." She tapped the flash drives on the table. "This changes everything. We have probable cause for warrants now. We can seize their servers, freeze their assets, bring in executives for questioning." "What about Marcus?" Evelyn asked. "We have units moving to detain him now, along with Gerard Blackwood, Patricia Reeves, and several others you've identified." Morrison looked at Daniel. "As for you, Mr. Hayes, there's the matter of your illegal investigation and your organization's involvement. I acted alone. My handlers ordered me to stand down. I ignored them. So you say. We'll still need to speak with them, but for now you're cooperative witnesses rather than suspects." She stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be worse than tonight. Once this goes public, it'll be a media circus." They emerged from the FBI office into early morning light. The city was waking up, people heading to work, unaware that one of the country's largest defense contractors was about to implode. Richard had arranged hotel rooms for them. Separate locations, security details, everything anonymous. As they parted ways in the lobby, Evelyn caught Daniel's arm. "Hayes, is that really your name?" "Daniel Hayes, Captain USMC, retired. Reed was the cover identity." "Were you ever going to tell me?" "Eventually, after this was over." "And the marriage? Was any of that real?" Daniel thought about the question, about the contract they'd signed, the performance they'd maintained, the partnership they'd built through necessity and shared danger. It started as an operation, a way to get close to the target. He met her eyes. But somewhere along the way, it became something else. "I don't know what to call it, but it was real." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say the worst lies are the ones we tell ourselves, that truth is the only foundation worth building on." He was right. "So here's a truth. I'm glad you lied your way into my life, even if it was for the wrong reasons." She managed a tired smile. "Partners?" "Partners." She left with Richard and her security detail. James had already gone with the FBI for protective custody. Daniel stood alone in the hotel lobby, exhausted and wired and not sure what came next. His phone, a new one the FBI had provided, buzzed with a message from his handler. "Debrief required. Tomorrow 0900. You're in considerable trouble." He typed back, "Understood." But it was worth it. The response was curt. We'll see. Daniel went to his room and finally, after 3 years of hunting and 6 days of chaos, let himself sleep. He woke 12 hours later to his phone ringing. The news was on every channel. Cross-defense executives arrested, FBI raids on offices and warehouses, congressional hearings announced. The story was still unfolding, details emerging about weapons sales and murdered contractors, and a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. Evelyn called at noon. "Have you seen the news?" "Hard to miss it. Richard got me a statement prepared. I'm going public this afternoon, telling my father's story, explaining why he died, what he was trying to prevent." Her voice was steadier than it had been in days. "I wanted you to know before it happens, in case you need to prepare." "For what?" "They're going to ask about my husband, about our marriage, about whether you were part of the investigation or just an opportunist." "What are you going to tell them?" "The truth. That you were investigating my company, that I found out and decided to help, that we worked together to expose corruption that killed my father." She paused. "And that despite everything, despite the lies and the cover identity and the fake marriage certificate, I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in a long time." "Evelyn, I'm not asking for anything, Daniel. I'm just telling you where I stand. After this is over, after the trials and the hearings and the rebuilding, I don't know what happens to us. Maybe the marriage was just a legal fiction that served its purpose. Maybe it was something else." He heard her take a breath. "But either way, I wanted you to know I don't regret it." "Neither do I." After she hung up, Daniel watched her press conference on TV. She stood at a podium outside the FBI office, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. She looked exhausted and determined and absolutely certain. She told the truth, all of it. Her father's investigation, his murder, the conspiracy to cover it up, Marcus Chen's network of corruption, the complicity of government officials, the weapons that ended up in the hands of America's enemies. And yes, her marriage to a man who'd been investigating the company, who'd helped her find the evidence that brought it all down. The questions came fast and hostile. Was the marriage legitimate? Did she know her husband was an investigator? Was this all a setup to destroy cross-defense? Evelyn handled them with a composure Daniel hadn't seen before. She didn't deflect or spin or hide behind legal language. She just spoke plainly about what she'd discovered and what she'd done about it. When a reporter asked if she regretted marrying Daniel Hayes, she paused. "I regret that we met under false pretenses. I regret that circumstances forced us into a partnership built on necessity rather than choice. But do I regret working with him to expose the truth about my father's murder? No, never." The press conference ended. Daniel's phone rang immediately. Reporters, news producers, people wanting his side of the story. He ignored them all, except one call from Morrison. "Hayes, we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Marcus Chen. We went to arrest him this morning. He was gone. Apartment empty, accounts drained despite the freeze, passport missing. He ran. More like he had an escape plan ready. We're checking airports, ports, border crossings. But he had a 12-hour head start. He could be anywhere." Daniel felt cold certainty settle in his chest. "He's not running away. He's tying up loose ends." "What do you mean?" "Everyone who can testify against him. Evelyn, James, me. We're still threats. And Marcus doesn't leave threats unresolved. We've got protective details on all of you. It won't be enough. You don't know him like I do. He's patient, methodical. He'll wait until we let our guard down, then he'll move." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "What do you suggest?" "We don't wait for him to come to us. We find him first." "That's not how this works. You're witnesses, not investigators." Gerard had files on everything, including Marcus's contingency plans, emergency protocols, safe houses, contacts in countries without extradition treaties. "Let me go through them. I'll find where he went." "And then what? You're not a federal agent. You can't just..." "Then give me to someone who is." "Your people, Interpol, whoever has jurisdiction. I'll consult, but I'm not sitting here waiting for Marcus to kill everyone I care about." Morrison agreed reluctantly. By evening, Daniel was back at the FBI office going through the files they'd seized from Gerard's office. Evelyn joined him despite Morrison's objections, and together they pieced together Marcus's escape route. "He's got properties in 7 countries, Evelyn said, highlighting a spreadsheet. "But only 3 are in places without extradition to the U.S. Venezuela, Belarus, and Myanmar, Daniel read. Venezuela's too unstable right now. Belarus would require Russian approval he probably doesn't have. Myanmar. He's got connections there from weapons contracts. A compound outside Yangon, registered under a shell company. Daniel pulled up satellite imagery of the location. Remote, fortified, defensible. Exactly where someone like Marcus would go to ground while planning his next move. How fast can we get there, sis? He asked Morrison. We can't. Myanmar doesn't cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. We'd need diplomatic channels, international warrants, cooperation that could take months. He'll be gone by then, or he'll have already sent people after Evelyn and James. So what do you propose? Daniel looked at Evelyn, then back at Morrison. I propose we stop playing by rules that Marcus isn't following. He's in Myanmar, outside the law's reach. We need to go outside the law, too. That's insane. You want to conduct an illegal operation in a foreign country? I want to finish what I started 3 years ago. Bring Marcus Chen to justice for murdering Sarah Mitchell, William Cross, and everyone else who got in his way. Morrison shook her head. I can't authorize that. Even if I wanted to, I don't have the authority. Then I'll find someone who does. He made a call to his handler, the first contact since he'd gone rogue. The conversation was terse and professional. You violated every protocol, endangered the entire operation. You should be facing charges. I know, but I got results. Cross-defense is finished, and we've exposed corruption that goes all the way to the Pentagon. That has to count for something. It counts. It also counts that Marcus Chen escaped and is currently beyond our reach. Not beyond mine. Give me a team and authorization. I'll bring him back. This isn't a movie, Hayes. We can't just conduct extractions in foreign countries. You've done it before. Black sites, rendition programs, operations that never made it into official reports. I was part of some of them, remember? The silence on the other end told him his handler was considering it. If we authorize this, and that's a very big if, it would be completely off book. No official support, no backup if things go wrong. I understand. And you'd need to bring him back alive. We need his testimony to prosecute the people he was working with in government. Alive and talking, got it. I'll make some calls, but Hayes, this is your last chance. You screw this up, and we're done. You're on your own. The line went dead. Evelyn had been listening to the whole conversation. You're really going to do this? Fly to Myanmar and extract Marcus Chen from a fortified compound. Unless you have a better idea. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. This is a military operation. This is my fight. My father, my company. I'm not sitting here while you finish it. Her expression was steel. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't kill him before we get answers. Evelyn, this isn't negotiable. I know. That's what you keep saying. But here's what's also not negotiable. I've come this far. Risked everything, lost everything, and I'm not stopping now. Daniel looked at her, the CEO who'd married a stranger to save her company, who'd broken into offices and faced down armed men, who'd survived assassination attempts and media scrutiny and the collapse of everything she'd known. She wasn't the same woman he'd met 2 weeks ago in that boardroom. Neither was he the same man. All right, he said, partners to the end. They left for Myanmar 3 days later on a private flight arranged by Daniel's organization. The team was small, 4 operators, all former special forces, all experienced in extractions. They landed in Bangkok and drove across the border using forged credentials. Marcus's compound was exactly where the satellite imagery had shown it, 15 miles outside Yangon, hidden in jungle, surrounded by walls and guards. The operators spent 2 days doing reconnaissance, mapping patrol patterns, identifying weaknesses. On the 3rd night, they moved. Daniel and 2 operators went over the wall while the others created a distraction at the front gate. Suppressed weapons took down sentries silently. They moved through the compound like ghosts, clearing rooms, neutralizing resistance. Marcus was in the main building, surrounded by bodyguards and computer systems. He was destroying files when they breached the door, burning documents and wiping drives. It's over, Marcus, Daniel said, weapon trained on him. Marcus looked up, genuinely surprised. Hayes, I have to admit, I didn't think you'd find me this fast. Where's the evidence? The files you're trying to destroy? Already gone. Encrypted and scattered across servers you'll never find. Everything you think you know, everything you think you've proven. I've got insurance policies you can't imagine. We've got enough to put you away for life. Your people are already talking, making deals. My people know what happens to people who talk. Gerard, Patricia, they'll plead the fifth and hope I don't send someone after their families. Marcus smiled coldly. You haven't won, Hayes. You've just started a war you can't finish. Movement behind them. Evelyn stepped into the room, having followed despite orders to stay back. She looked at Marcus with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. You killed my father. I saved the company from his weakness. William would have destroyed everything we built over some misguided sense of morality. He was your friend, your partner for 23 years. He was an obstacle, nothing personal. Evelyn raised the weapon one of the operators had given her. Daniel reached out to stop her, but she shook her head. I'm not going to shoot you, Marcus. I'm going to watch you stand trial. Watch you lose everything like you made me lose everything. Watch you spend the rest of your life in prison knowing you failed. She lowered the weapon. Daniel secured Marcus with zip ties while the operators gathered what evidence hadn't been destroyed. They were loading into vehicles when explosions rocked the compound. Marcus had rigged the buildings with charges, a final scorched earth policy. Fire bloomed into the night sky as they raced toward the border. He destroyed everything, Evelyn said, watching the compound burn in the distance. Not everything. We've got him. And that's enough. The extraction went smoothly. Marcus was transferred to FBI custody at the Bangkok embassy, then extradited back to the U.S. The trial took 8 months. Every detail of Cross Defense's corruption laid bare for the world to see. Gerard Blackwood testified in exchange for a reduced sentence. Patricia Reeves did the same. Government officials resigned or were indicted. The conspiracy unwound thread by thread until the full scope was visible: billions in illegal weapons sales, dozens of deaths, a network of corruption that had operated for over a decade. Marcus Chen was convicted on 47 counts, including murder, fraud, weapons trafficking, and treason. The judge gave him 6 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. At the sentencing, Evelyn gave a victim impact statement. She spoke about her father, about Sarah Mitchell, about all the people Marcus had destroyed in pursuit of profit. She spoke clearly and without emotion, letting the facts speak for themselves. When she finished, Marcus looked at her and said, Your father would be disappointed. You destroyed his company to satisfy your need for revenge. I destroyed your corruption, Evelyn replied. My father's company, the one he actually built, the one that meant something, that's being rebuilt now, without you. 6 months after the trial, Cross Defense was restructured under new leadership. Evelyn declined to return as CEO, instead joining the board as an independent director focused on ethics oversight. The company lost half its value but gained something more important: legitimacy. Daniel's organization offered him his job back. He declined. 3 years undercover had been enough. He wanted something quieter, something that didn't require lies and false identities. He opened a small security consulting firm in Brooklyn, advising companies on protecting themselves from the kind of corruption that had destroyed Cross Defense. It was honest work, and it let him sleep at night. Evelyn visited his office on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. She'd cut her hair shorter, wore less formal clothes. She looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. Nice place, she said, looking around at his modest office. It pays the bills. What brings you here? I've been thinking about our marriage, the one that started as a contract and ended up as something neither of us planned. We never got divorced, Daniel said. With everything that happened, the trial, the rebuilding, I know. I've been thinking about that too. She sat across from his desk. We could file papers tomorrow, end this legally, move on with our lives. That would make sense. It would. Or we could try something completely insane. What's that? We could try being married for real. No contracts, no corporate requirements, no investigation. Just 2 people who went through hell together and came out the other side. Daniel studied her face, looking for doubt or uncertainty, found only the same steel determination that had carried her through everything. That is completely insane. I know, but we've done crazier things. We barely know each other. Everything about how we met was a lie. So we start over. Learn the truth this time. She stood and extended her hand. Hi, I'm Evelyn Cross. I used to run a defense company before I helped bring down a massive conspiracy. I'm terrible at cooking, I hate mornings, and I have trust issues I'm working through in therapy. Daniel shook her hand. Daniel Hayes, former Marine, former spy, currently trying to figure out who I am when I'm not pretending to be someone else. I run too much, I drink too much coffee, and I have nightmares about the people I couldn't save. See? Now we're being honest, she smiled. So what do you say? Want to try this marriage thing for real? He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made, about 3 years spent chasing ghosts. Then he thought about Evelyn standing beside him through everything, facing danger and uncertainty without flinching. Some partnerships were built on love. Some were built on necessity. And some, rare and strange, were built on both. Yeah, he said, let's try it for real. They had dinner that night at a small restaurant in Brooklyn, far from corporate galas and defense contractors and the world they'd left behind. They talked about small things, favorite movies, childhood memories, dreams that had nothing to do with weapons or investigations or justice. It was awkward and tentative, and nothing like the performances they'd given at the gala. It was real. And for the first time in 3 years, Daniel felt like he could finally breathe. The marriage that had started as a desperate gamble became something neither of them had expected. A genuine partnership built on truth and shared scars. They didn't have a fairy tale ending. They had something better, an honest beginning, built on a foundation solid enough to hold whatever came next. Cross Defense continued operating under new leadership, smaller but cleaner. James Whitmore took a position there, working to rebuild the culture his father had enabled to decay. Richard Pemberton retired with honors, his final act of loyalty to William Cross complete. And somewhere in a federal supermax prison, Marcus Chen sat in a cell and remembered the empire he'd built and lost. The weapons sales, the murders, the conspiracy that had made him rich and powerful and ultimately destroyed him. He'd been right about one thing. Reputation mattered in the defense industry. His reputation now was that of a traitor, and it would follow him until the day he died. Daniel and Evelyn's reputation was different. They'd become the story people told about standing up to corruption, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when the situation demanded it. The truth was messier than the story. They'd broken laws, hurt people, made choices that haunted them. But they'd also stopped something terrible from continuing. They'd brought justice to those who thought they were above it. And they'd found each other in the process, two broken people who'd learned to trust again, against all odds and better judgment. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough.